OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
It's 7:30. You're very welcome to Monday's OTB AM. Eoin and Nathan with you right the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. We'll also have Alan Quinlan, we'll have Anthony Moyles, we'll have Eddie Brennan with us between now and then to go through the events over the course of the weekend. You can drop us a tweet at Off The Ball or leave a comment on the YouTube stream if that's where you're getting us this morning. Nathan Murphy is in studio. How are you getting on?
I'm alright.
I must say...
Correct?
Yeah, same. I must say, watching two golf tournaments is a lot tougher than I thought it would be. I guess we sometimes underappreciate that golf coverage in itself is essentially red zone, and trying to dual screen two different golf competitions, which I don't remember ever doing in my life. It's usually golf and something else, is a very, very taxing effort. And I'm particularly tired this morning after trying to keep an eye on both Eoin Mcilroy and, as it turned out, Lpga Tour, whose opportunities to win last night seems to coincide with one another within the space of about 10 to 20 seconds.
Well, I think watching two golf tournaments is tough, but watching two sensational golf tournaments is even more difficult, because you just couldn't miss a shot of either, as Eoin Mcilroy went into a playoff with two of the best players in the world in Jennifer Kupcho and Nelly Korda on the Lpga, and obviously came up just short in the end. And the US Open, which was one of the great recent major championships, the scrap down the back nine between Matt Fitzpatrick, Will Zalatoris, Scotty Scheffler, and a really great supporting cast of Matsuyama, Rory Mcilroy, John Rahm, players you all thought might be able to make a bit of a run in that back nine. Never quite happened for any of them. And yeah, Matt Fitzpatrick, first ever major US Open champion, came in this week hotly tipped. Don't know if you know this, but he won the US Amateur there in 2013. They might have mentioned this once or twice. And to hit some of the shots he hit on that back nine, he hit all the great moments seemed to come from Matt Fitzpatrick in yesterday's final round, and because of that, I think he was more than a deserving winner. And the celebrations were just brilliant. I was saying they were somewhat reminiscent of Shane Lowry in Portrush. Obviously not the same crowd, because this was over in America, but he seemed to have so many family members and friends there, and he's been waiting a long time for this. He's been the next big thing in English golf. He's had a lot of success on the European Tour, never won in America before, but he was just sensational yesterday. And the bunker shot on 18, where you thought this could be another blow up. Remember, Scotty Scheffler double bogey, 4-putted 18, got away with it at the Masters. We did double bogey from Mito Pereira, who was cruising to victory at the PGA. Like, these things do happen, and Fitzpatrick somehow managed to basically slice one onto the green and 2-putted and gets himself a major championship.
And he was saying afterwards that his fairway bunkers have been a big problem recently, and that's the one place where he didn't want to go. I was thinking full on Mito Pereira when he goes left off the 18th tee.
Probably got a tiny bit fortunate in that was the only shot that was on, so he didn't really have to overly think it. Now, he still had to execute it under enormous pressure, knowing that Will Zalatoris was hot in his heels, knowing that Scotty Scheffler was already in the clubhouse on 5 under par. But I think once he stepped up and realised he wasn't right behind it, and there was an angle just out to the left that he could slice it around or fade it around, that he probably knew that he could pull that off. But it was still one of the great shots. Like, people always talk about Sandy Lyle's bunker shot, the Masters is the greatest bunker shot of all time. That one will probably be shown for years and years as well. And it was just so much drama. The course, Brookline, was one of the stars of the show as well, because every hole brought into play the possibility of bogey, double bogey, which meant nobody could ever stay comfortable. And Fitzpatrick finished on 6 under par, which is interesting, because it felt 6 under par was sort of kryptonite for these players. Every time someone got to 6 under par, instantly they just fell back to the field. Whether it was Colin Morikawa on the Saturday, John Rahm, Scotty Scheffler, they just couldn't seem to get to that number and stay there. But Fitzpatrick did it.
That's the perfect winning score, isn't it? Or something close to it. You don't want players winning with 20 under par.
Well, not a US Open. The US Open often used to pride itself on level par being the winning score. And if the rain hadn't arrived on Saturday night, we may well have ended up with a winning score of somewhere around level par. We were recording Golf Weekly, our watch along yesterday morning at about 11:30. We're saying, what would Rory Mcilroy be happy with? And so I said, if he finished on 2 under par, you'd probably take it right now. But that was before we knew what the weather forecast was like, and there was some heavy rain which softened up the course, which made it a little bit more accessible. There wasn't quite the same level of wind yesterday as there was on Saturday, which meant that scoring was somewhat better. And we did see some good low scoring in there, like Scotty Scheffler shot a 67, in one of those final groups. So if it was like Saturday, I think we probably would have finished with a score of level par. But it had a bit of everything across the week, where scoring on Saturday was so tough, where anytime anyone went long on the green, or that real deep rough just around the green, you weren't able to get out of it. So yeah, I think 6 under par gives you the sort of drama you want.
And you also want the two head honchos playing together as well. To be honest with you, I thought Scheffler was going to win this thing, especially that moment when is it on the 8th hole where he has to take 2 pitches, where the ball rolls back to him the second time, he absolutely nails it. Like, I thought, well, that's your highlight reel straight away. And with the pitching wedge, wasn't it, at Augusta, was one of the more iconic moments where he actually pitches in. And I thought, we're seeing this all over again. Scheffler's going to win this thing. But the fact that it turned out to be Fitzpatrick and Zalatoris was the thing that made it. And even on the 11th hole, you're thinking Zalatoris at this point, when he makes the birdie putt on par 3, Fitzpatrick misses. And then on the 12th, it was the following hole, wasn't it, where Zalatoris makes his par-saving putt from Monster Range, and you're like, this is Will Zalatoris' moment, and Matt Fitzpatrick might not be able to do a whole lot about it. And at the end of the day, it was still just an inch between Zalatoris and a playoff, which would have taken this night into a whole other level.
I think this was the first time there'd been a US Open at Brookline where there wasn't a playoff to decide, and everyone felt like it was heading that way throughout the entire tournament. Like Zalatoris, as a bit of a superstar who has yet to actually win a golf tournament on the PGA Tour, but his record in the majors is ridiculous. He's already finished as runner-up in the Masters, the PGA and the US Open now over the last 2 years. For a guy who a lot of people feel can't putt, and on the regular PGA Tour just can't. He's one of the worst putters out there. They showed a slow motion of his short range putting technique, and it's like something if an amateur had it. If someone like me, a 20 handicapper had it, you go,
it's so
what are
strange.
you doing?
Like, what is it? Is it like that's his stroke week in, week out on the PGA Tour? Because it looks like a nervous putting stroke.
Oh, well, he pulls it back, it sort of moves around in a little circle, and then he hits it off the toe. And I think what happens at majors, why it doesn't impact them, is that the greens are so much tougher generally at majors that it's a bit of a leveler, that the best putters can't use their skill to full effect because there's just so much difficulty involved. It brings everybody into it. So on the regular PGA Tour season, where maybe the greens are a bit easier, it's the best putters who come to the fore. But his long-range putting, there's never been an issue with. And he actually doesn't miss that many of the short putts. You just wonder how sustainable it is, that sort of technique and the nerves that it must induce. But yeah, he's pulled off a full-scale Louis Westhuizen already in his career of finishing runner-up in everything.
What's the Westhuizen number? 4?
I think it's more than that.
Is it?
I think it's more.
In majors?
Louis has one at least.
Fair.
But yeah, Zalatoris is still a young guy. And yeah, it was one of those tournaments you just did not want to end.
Leona Maguire then, this was something that as the evening went on, we're kind of like, probably need to get the laptop out here just to make sure that this playoff doesn't happen, because it will be rather extraordinary if she managed to find herself into a playoff situation here on the final day of her competition. She was 7 under for her final round, and essentially gets into a 3-way tie with Kupcho and Korda, 2 of the finest players on the Lpga Tour. Nelly Korda is somebody that she beat in, was it the 4-ball or the 4-swim at the Solheim last year, in both. And of course, then the other player in the singles coming down the home stretch at the Solheim last year. So somebody that she was very familiar with, and he thought that if she gets into a playoff, that she'll be able to potentially beat one of them. So this was unbelievably dramatic, because it looked like Kupcho was going to win this a hole earlier than she did. I'm not sure how far away the putt was that she missed. It was like 4 feet or something like that.
At most it was 4 feet. It was done.
It was done, and that was her opportunity to win it, and she missed it. And you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, that is absolutely brutal. But this is Leona Maguire's to lose now. Off the second playoff tee, Leona Maguire goes way right, and all of a sudden you're thinking it's swung the other way, but it swings back in Leona Maguire's favour after an incredible recovery wood, which just fades beautifully onto the green. And you're thinking at that point, with Leona Maguire tapping in, that when they go to a third playoff hole, that this is Leona Maguire very much in the driving seat. But that third playoff hole didn't happen at all. Leona Maguire misses has a Kupcho-esque miss in the second playoff hole herself, and it's absolutely cruel that that's how it ended for her last night.
Yeah, I think the way Kupcho played and the chances she had, she was probably a deserving winner. But you just thought that maybe it was written in the stars that Leona Maguire was going to win this tournament when Kupcho missed that short putt on the first playoff hole, but then Leona Maguire will be kicking herself for the putt she missed on the second playoff hole. Leona Maguire probably needed this. She's missed 4 of the last 5 cuts, but there's something about big tournaments and going against the best players in the world that seems to bring out the best in Leona Maguire. Like, her best performance recently was at the US Women's Open, one of the majors, and Nelly Korda, Jennifer Kupcho. So Kupcho, we know she took a part in the Solheim Cup, and they have a long, storied history together throughout the college scene as well, where they were constantly battling with each other. And Nelly Korda, I don't know what the history between Leona Maguire and Nelly Korda is, but whenever her name comes up in an interview with Leona Maguire, and we've had Leona on the show quite a few times on Golf Weekly over the last year, and we've listened to her dad a few times as well, and he's mentioned it, that Nelly Korda, maybe it's just simply the fact that she is the best player in the world. She's number 2 at the moment because she's been out with an injury. But there's something about Nelly Korda that always seems to almost change the tone of Leona Maguire's response, that, you know, she brings out the absolute best in Leona Maguire in competing with her. And you just feel that the confidence that this should give Leona Maguire at a crucial time of the season. There's a major next week. The USPGA is on. A Congressional where, you know, Rory Mcilroy, a Congressional, Irish players have a stunning success through the years. At that, yes, Leona Maguire, just at the right time of the season, is finding her form again. And it's probably not surprising that she had a run of missed cuts, considering all she's had to deal with over the past 6 months, and a real life-changing 6 to 9 months with what happened at the Solheim Cup and winning on the Lpga Tour for the first time. But you watch her last night, and she totally belongs in that sort of company.
Yeah, absolutely. And then a major Congressional this weekend for her as well. So we'll be keeping an eye on Leona Maguire as the week continues. It is 7:42. You're with us here on Mondays, OTB AM. It's brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. It is time for the Gillette Labs Performance Rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. Our performances was just lacked that intensity.
OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. And every week we're giving away a Gillette Labs shaving kit. Be in with a chance of winning one. Just let us know who you think should make the performance rankings. The best place to enter is on the Off the Ball Instagram page. You'll see the comments box in our story, which is put up generally every Sunday night. And Nathan, you're taking us through the red to the green this morning. We're starting in the red, and just a couple of other golf things to tie up. The LIV Tour performances over the course of the weekend, not great.
Well, we're just bringing you the latest instalment of the worldwide smear campaign against the LIV Golf Tour, and they're in the red in the performance rankings. It wasn't a good weekend for the LIV Golf Tour players. Dustin Johnson, the only one inside the top 25. He may well have been the only one inside the top 50. Phil Mickelson finishing up on 11 over par, and nobody really doing anything else that had played in that first tournament in London. Not helped again, I think, by comments from Graeme McDowell, who maybe was having a few cold beers on Saturday night, but decided to start responding to a lot of tweets when he was being asked about LIV Golf and what's going on there. And he basically implied that, listen, this is a smear campaign. Once we get through the smear campaign, all of this will just be fine, which is another remarkable doubling down from Graeme McDowell. I cannot believe how he has ended up positioning himself as the voice and as the face of LIV Golf and Saudi Arabian investment in golf, but he is all in on this. So another interesting part was when he was sort of referring to it's only going to get bigger and stronger, and it is. And while LIV Golf may well be in the red right now, I think the high of the last couple of weeks of golf, of McIlroy at the Canadian Open, of Fitzpatrick last night at the US Open, I don't think it'll bother LIV Golf too much, because all the rumours are that over the next 2 weeks we're going to have basically a day-by-day drip feed of superstars moving to the LIV Golf Tour. Abraham Ancer, the Mexican player who is a top 30 in the world player, due to be announced today that he's going. There's a huge amount of speculation around Colin Morikawa. Now, it seems to be based off one interview where he was somewhat non-committal, but it was done on the week of the US Open, and it may well have been just more, I don't want to be distracted by this sort of thing right now. But there's a lot more players going to end up playing in the first tournament in Portland, Oregon, the week after next. And we could end up with somewhere 18 of the world's top 50, and then you have a proper divide in golf, and you don't get many tournaments like you got at the US Open. So On the course, I think a bad week for Liv Golf, and right now when they're playing a very shortened schedule of 8 tournaments, I think that'll change as they get more players. I think they have the funds to extend this to 14, 20 tournaments, whatever they need. But are these golfers, are they going to be coming into these events in peak condition if they're not playing against the best players in the world? But what Liv Golf will say is, well, we're going to have the very best players in the world soon.
Dublin's Fair City has been in touch to say, since golf has gone behind the Sky paywall, I'm sure many people have lost all interest in the game. So there's, taking that point into account is kind of like the floating voter view of golf, and I guess the fact that there may not be a whole pile of people who can still be attracted to the game. Does what happened at the weekend change your perception of how successful Liv Golf will be? Does it recapture the soul of those people who are kind of on the fence about golf in all its forms, thinking that we can get entertainment week in, week out on a Sunday night when we have players of Fitzpatrick's quality and Zalatoris' quality going toe to toe?
I think maybe we underestimate how good golf can be at the top professional level and quickly forget about the drama that it brings you on a Sunday night. But I don't think what happened last night will make any difference to the Liv Golf Tour and their plans and how it will develop. Everybody was on this massive high last Sunday night when McIlroy won the Canadian Open against Justin Thomas and Tony Finau. The PGA Tour couldn't have dreamt it up, and then McIlroy makes a smart remark about Greg Norman, and then this week you back it up with a great US Open. We don't know what's going to happen with the Liv Tour and the majors. Will they be allowed back in next year? Will they come to some sort of a compromise? Who knows? But the Liv Golf Tour, they aren't working on emotion here. They're working on hard numbers, and the numbers are just getting bigger and bigger for the best players in the world. So if you are losing an Abraham Answer, if you're losing even the likes of Adam Scott, Bryson DeChambeau is gone now, Patrick Reed is gone. Brooks Koepka's brother's already playing there. Is Brooks Koepka got a loyalty to the PGA Tour? Brooks Koepka has been one of those who always wanted to play less golf and never had any great interest in the run-of-the-mill golf tournament. So while the PGA Tour is absolutely winning on the emotional stakes, in cold hard cash, they cannot compete with Liv.
Yeah, for sure. We'll come back to the golf in just a moment, because in the amber is Rory Mcilroy. Just one other thing in the red this morning are the Cork hurlers. The angle on this, I guess, is the fact that
they were beaten on.
Well, they definitely did lose a game of hurling on Saturday. You think that it's all doom and gloom for Cork?
Maybe not in the long term, but it does feel as though it's the end of the Kieran Kingston era. He was non-committal after the match. It was a game they never really looked like winning. They missed a huge amount of chances in the first half. It was a 12 wides in the first half. How was Pat Horgan on the pitch? Whatever about form, anything else, you're just thinking an All-Ireland quarter-final, what he gives you from the place ball, at the very least. If he was on one leg, you'd have him out there, just because he is going to be so consistent. And he's brought on at half-time, which seems like an admission that they got this wrong, but I could not believe it when I saw that Cork starting 15 and he wasn't in there, and there seemed to be a few questionable selection decisions. Obviously, after the round robin, there was, it looked like they were dead and buried at one stage in the round robin, and we were talking on this show about Kieran Kingston's last game in charge. But yeah, I think they sort of went out with a bit of a whimper. Galway never fully pulled clear, so always sort of kept them in it, but it just didn't look as though Cork were going to win this. What are we, 2005, heading towards 20 years? Or 2005, sorry. So heading towards 20 years since Cork last won a hurling All-Ireland. I think that gets them in the red, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. It's just, there's always kind of this expectation of Cork, which feels, or it has felt in the past, as if it's beyond what they should be achieving. That this idea that Cork have a right to be, not a right, but an expectation to be in the winners' enclosure or close to it almost every single year. I guess we're reaching a point soon where that expectation is absolutely fair enough. When you look at some of the underage success they've had over the last couple of years, you'd have to think now, next year, the year after, that if they're not one of the top two teams in the country, then there will be questions asked about that talent line and converting underage success into top tier success.
Well, it's not easy. That has been a challenge for many teams in many different codes through the years. It feels as though they also need a philosophy change, that their scene has been soft. All of the previews that I've heard were, well, if Galway come with a physicality, Cork just won't be able to deal with them, and that's not how you want to be going into championship matches. That they need to be able to play a running game, a free-flowing sort of game. And like, that's not going to get you to be one of the top 2 teams in the country. Like, Limerick have both. Like, they can play whatever way they want, and nobody is ever going to match them in the physicality stakes. So, to be beaten in an All-Ireland quarter-final, to go from that to suddenly becoming one of the top 2 teams in the country, it feels like quite a jump. It'll be interesting to see what they do next, who they look for. Do they stay internal? I know a lot of people feel that Eddie Brennan, who's coming up, maybe should be a contender and they should look outside. It doesn't feel as though that's going to happen. Maybe Pat Ryan gets it. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting winter, no doubt, in Cork.
Yeah, like you talk about the physicality, like one of the kind of defining images of Saturday is, Burke's shoulder. There's some disagreement as to whether or not it was shoulder to shoulder, shoulder to the helmet. There was no real intent, but that, for me, when I saw it, I was like, oh Jesus, that's like that Galway full back line showing to Cork what they can do, and they'll probably do that in the next round as well. They're probably going to be more physical than most of the people they come up against. And then also you've got that Conor Whelan goal where he manages to just get inside his man, hold him off back at the net. There's a real physicality about Galway which is going to be commended and will probably give them a chance against Limerick. And I think a couple of years ago when we were talking about the teams who were best placed to topple Limerick, I think a lot of people still would have had Galway in there because of the players that they have, and Cork probably just aren't at that level. The thing is, not a whole pile of things would have needed to go different for them in the first half in particular, for them to be in a commanding position in that game. And like in isolation, Saturday will be a really, really hard one to take for Cork. It's just how deep the questions will actually go over the next little while as to where the problems are for Cork, because I think it does come back to this idea that Cork, or the feeling is that they should be close to the top 2 every single year. On the other side of things, they were both poor enough hurling quarter-finals, I think it's fair to say, but both second halves, I thought anyway, absolutely lit up. And the Clare game was just incredible. I think there was a real sense of caution. I was chatting to Mick in the office on Friday about everybody talking Clare up ahead of this game against Wexford at the weekend. And when you start talking them up and you look at Wexford, I guess, coming in on the back of a win, Clare coming in on the back of an extra time defeat, a heartbreaking defeat, there was always a chance that they could have got caught a little bit flat-footed. And it so nearly happened. And I just can't make my mind up as to what the narrative is going to be. What will the truth around Clare be when we get to the All-Ireland semi-final weekend? Will it be that, Wexford almost beat them and Wexford wouldn't be considered one of the All-Ireland favourites, therefore Clare cannot be considered one of the All-Ireland favourites? Or is it that Clare were really bad for a lot of the game and still won in a classic second half All-Ireland hurling quarter-final, and therefore will absolutely get to a higher level against Kilkenny, potentially knock them out and potentially make it to an All-Ireland final? One of those two things is not true, and it's very, very hard to put your finger on what the case is with Clare at the moment. You would have to say, though, that Tony Kelly can't play so bad for 70 minutes again. I know he was brilliant for the last quarter, but for first half of hurling, he won't be as bad again. You can definitely point to some of the substitutes they brought on, Aaron Shanaher, Shane Meehan, to live wire forwards that'll inject Kilkenny with plenty of worry deep in the second half, regardless of how that game is going. And personally, if I had to guess, if I had to take a stab in the dark, I would lean towards the Clare team that played against Limerick a couple of times, the Clare team that did finish second in Munster, the team that some people think is the second best team in Munster, and I think that's going to be a hell of a semi-final.
That old cliche of semi-finals are there to be won felt like that with quarter-finals. It didn't look like it was about performance really for any of the 4 teams. It was just about somehow scrapping away through to an All-Ireland semi-final, having a little bit of break, regather yourself. I was still surprised by just how poor Clare were at times. We had Jamesy O'Connor on the show on Thursday night, and he sort of predicted exactly what was going to happen. And I was surprised by the sort of doom and gloom and negativity that surrounded Clare, because yes, there was a heartbreaking element, absolutely, to the manner of the Munster final defeat. But I thought that they got so close to one of the all-time great teams. The confidence that they would take from that and should take from that would actually mean it was a quick enough recovery, and they would think, we want Limerick again. We want to face them in an All-Ireland final because we know we're not that far off them. But it did seem that maybe mentally they were somewhat crushed by the Munster final defeat and really struggled to get back up. But when it really mattered, they came through. They absolutely came through, and now they do have a good time to regroup, and it's a long time since they played Kilkenny in a championship clash. But I think on what we've seen from the two so far this year, you would have Clare as favourites going into that semi-final. If
Limerick win the other semi-final, I'm pretty happy with whoever comes through the other one, because I want to see Clare against Limerick again. I think that'll be, we know that'll be a good All-Ireland hurling final because of what they've already shown this year. But I also want to see Limerick against Kilkenny again, and I think the neutral observer out there is probably more drawn to Clare. I'm not sure if I'm right in that, but I kind of feel that they're a more neutrally attractive team because so many people have seen Kilkenny win so many All-Irelands down through the years. But I actually wonder if Kilkenny in that final could be just as good a prospect as Clare versus Limerick, because we go back to 2019, the last time Limerick were beaten, it was Kilkenny who undid them. It was Brian Cody who did a job on Limerick that day, and I just wonder, could he do something similar to them again? And it'll be very, very, very interesting to see how Limerick prepare for Brian Cody again in a knockout championship game. Of course, we're completely writing Galway out of the picture there and Henry Shefflin, but I think that's probably the least likely of the two scenarios to happen for an underdog to win is Galway knocking Limerick out.
Yeah, and listen, if Limerick are beaten at any stage this season, it's going to be an enormous shock, it feels, at this stage. But a Kilkenny-Galway final would obviously have its massive attractions as well. Would there have ever been a bigger sideshow going into any All-Ireland final than Cody and Shefflin? If somehow they were to end up meeting, I think it's highly unlikely to happen. I still think I'd like to see Clare back in the final against Limerick. I just was so impressed with them in that Munster final. I kind of thought that Limerick were cruising through Munster and that there wasn't a huge amount to read into the first game, but they backed it up, and a Tony Kelly in an All-Ireland final with a chance to put in one of the all-time great performances and take down this Limerick side would be pretty appetising.
Dennis Ryan has been in touch to say the standard of goalkeeping in Thurles, Limerick will canter to 3 in a row. That is definitely an outcome that is realistic, that Limerick do canter through the last 2 games, but we're hoping that they're going to get 2 wars before they actually have to lift 3 in a row, and the standard of goalkeeping is definitely poor. On Saturday that might have been in the red. Richard Redball says Wexford hurling should be in both the red sections. He's obviously pointed towards more of a Wexford collapse than a Clare comeback, it seems, on Saturday. And Dublin's Fair City has been back in touch to say Tip versus Galway minor yesterday was the best entertainment on offer. I've seen Shane Brophy, I think it was, saying that it was one of the best minor games he's ever seen. Comco Productions, meanwhile, says Rory wasn't close all through day 3 and day 4. Too many mistakes, but he will definitely win another major. And that brings us nicely onto the Amber, Nathan.
Yeah, I think Amber sums up perfectly where Rory McIlroy is. There was an awful lot to like about his performance over the weekend, but ultimately it's another major gone that he didn't win when he is in red hot form, and his attitude seemed to be as good as it's been over the last 8 years, and he put himself in a brilliant position heading into the weekend, putting as well as he's ever putted. His wedge play has massively improved over the past few months. But ultimately, his driving let him down over the weekend. And not just over the weekend, he was constantly scrapping, even on the first couple of days. He was just holding so many putts. It meant that there wasn't as much of a premium on his driving, but you felt if he was to contend over the weekend, he would have to improve off the tee. And his miss left cost him again and again and again, right from the opening tee shot on the 3rd round. And because of that, he just wasn't really a factor. We thought if he sorted that out, that he was putting so well. But all of his putts, and so many of his putts, were for par. Even going back to Friday and the near calamity when he had the double bogey, he holds this monster putt for double bogey at that stage. He just wasn't giving himself enough birdie opportunities, and the mental strain that must put on you, where hole after hole you're having a 15, 20 footer for par. That's difficult to sustain, and quite simply he couldn't drive it as badly and as poorly as he did yesterday and really get himself into contention. But I just think there's been such a change in his attitude and his outlook, it feels, over the past few weeks. He really does seem to be relishing being the guy leading the good side of golf right now, and being that leader, and has taken that in his shoulders, and I think it suits him being that player and having the elbows out and taking on Greg Norman. And he's going to St Andrews, where he has mixed emotions. You think back to 2010, his one and only Open Championship appearance at St Andrews, shoots 63 in the first round, gets these horrible weather conditions on the Friday afternoon, ends up shooting 80 in the second round, costs him his chance at that Open Championship. Doesn't play in 2015, has that accident when he was playing football. So he is going to St Andrews feeling he has a point to prove there. And if it's a links championship, it's an open championship, if the wind blows, it can become very difficult and a little bit of lottery, and again you can end up on the wrong side of the draw. But if the conditions are calm, his driving won't be as big an issue. Like St Andrews can be wide open in parts, so he can tone it down a little bit. He'll get away with his misses a little bit more, and if his wedge game and his putting is as good as it is right now, in, what are we, less than a month's time, McIlroy is going to have an unbelievable opportunity to win that Open Championship at St Andrews.
It seems like the safest money in golf now is to put it on Rory top 10 at a major. Just don't back him to win.
This feels different, and this entire year has felt differently. He's contended in all three majors. He felt like a factor in this tournament. I felt yesterday was the first time he'd gone into the final round of a major, probably since 2014, where he didn't really need to shoot a low number to go and win it. That now it turned out in hindsight, because scoring was a bit better. You know, he shot a 69 yesterday. He was under par yesterday, but he would have needed, he finished on 200, so he would have needed a 65 even to get into a playoff, which was probably never out there for him. But that it was going to be a bit of a scrap, and he was right there, and he just needed to hang tough and not let too many shots get away from him. But the 3 bogeys on the front nine meant he just had left himself with way too much to do. But yeah, I don't think you can be overly critical of how McIlroy played on an incredibly punishing golf course. He stuck at it. Nobody can question, his B game, his ability to grind, that the head drops, the shoulder slump. None of that was there over this weekend. He stuck at it right till the very end. And I think if he sorts out his driving, it's remarkable that we're saying if he sorts out his driving, for a decade we thought Rory Mcilroy was the greatest driver we'd ever seen, but that just seems to be a little bit off. He just needs to find a way of getting it all to come together on the same week of a major championship, and maybe St Andrews' 150th Open Championship. Hopefully for Rory, that'll be the one.
Seamus Power, T12, $359,000, I think, is what somebody who finishes 12th gets for the US Open.
It's not bad going. And yeah, Seamus Power, 71, 70, 70, 70. Model of consistency over the 4 days. And this is what he's doing now. He is a regular in and around the top of leaderboard on PGA Tour events, week on week, at major championships. It's such a life-changing 12 months for Seamus Power, from a guy who, it's fair to describe as a journeyman. That's what he was. He was scrapping for his card constantly, always in and around that 125th mark when you're going for your tour card for the next year, and goes on a run of consistency in the middle of the last summer, gets a victory out of it, secures his card. And there's some players, then they rest, then they go, finally I can relax a little bit, and they sort of take their card and they find themselves right back at square one again 18 months later. Seamus Power has just kicked on. The confidence that has given him, the fact that he's not thinking about money, he's not thinking about world ranking points every single week, just seems to have enabled him to bring his game to a whole other level. I haven't seen the world ranking this morning, but he must be in and around, certainly heading for top 35, top 30 in the world. He's going to be back here next week. He's playing in the Irish Open, so I'm sure he's going to have a huge crowd. Shane Lowry's going to be playing as well. No Rory Mcilroy at the Irish Open, but like Power, it's going to be such a different experience for Seamus Power. He hasn't played a huge amount of Irish Opens through the years because he's been based in America, and he couldn't afford really to miss out on a tournament the week of the Irish Open. He is going to have a crowd. Only Shane Lowry will have a bigger crowd following him than Seamus Power next week, so it's going to be a very, very special homecoming for him.
Shifty Lad has been in touch to say, I want to see Galway versus Kilkenny in the final. Handshake Gate would be a big narrative to that game. And he's also said, morning lads, really enjoyed the 2 games yesterday, and on TV having the hill to the right look great, as it didn't look as near empty because of the angle. Matt Fitz was so good too. Love his caddy, Billy Foster, getting a lot of love. 40 years in the bag, he finally gets a major win. I
say that the post-tournament interviews, and I think they do mean something when they think back to, say, Bryson DeChambeau winning and thanking his sponsors as the first thing he did after winning a major championship. Like, it's embarrassing.
The bottle.
This is not what you dream about. There was some great interviews with his family, and his dad was almost happier for Billy Foster than he was for his own son, because Billy Foster has caddied for some of the greatest players in the world, from Seve Ballesteros to Lee Westwood, and never got that major championship, and finally got it through Matt Fitzpatrick. And there was a brilliant moment at the end where Matt Fitzpatrick's brother Alex is a brilliant golfer as well, top amateur turning pro, not quite, I think, at the level maybe of where Matt is, but should go on and have a good career, where he ran over and he basically gave Matt a tap on the back on the green when they ran on, and he ran straight over to Will Zalatoris to commiserate with him. They both went to college together. I think they played college golf together, but everything about it was just classy touches all round from the Fitzpatrick family, and the emotion of it was great. I didn't know there was that side to Matt Fitzpatrick, so yeah, he looks like someone who's going to go and enjoy those celebrations.
Seamus Power is up from 41st in the world to 36th. So I think it was the start of the year, we were obviously talking quite a lot about him getting into the top 50, so he's really delivered on that and rocketed up the standings once again. So 36 in the world for Seamus Power after his top 12 finish at the weekend, level with John Ram at the end of play last night.
Big disappointment actually of the week, I think, was John Ram. Certainly of the final round. Like, remember 18, he's got a one-shot lead when he's going down 18 on Saturday night, and he's too ambitious out of the fairway bunker, hits the lip, comes back in, ends up taking double bogey. So Ram, you thought, shot back, just such a great opportunity to go back to back at the US Open, and nothing happened from it all yesterday. So, Seamus Power finishing on that. Like, Seamus Power's never played at the Open Championship, so he's going there next month to St Andrews as well. So it's all good for Seamus Power right now. Let's
circle back to what Shifty Lad was saying in the comments there. The Tailteann Cup, they made a better job of it on television, it felt, than the round 4 qualifiers the previous week. There was essentially the same amount of people in the ground, but it felt like more of an occasion yesterday.
It felt like common sense. Like, it's a trick of the light in many ways, but I flicked on to the first match yesterday and was like, bloody hell, there's a big crowd at this. But what they simply did was they put pretty much everybody in the Hogan stand on the lower tier. That's all you could see for the vast majority of the TV coverage. And it felt as though probably having everybody together also created a better atmosphere than a week ago. And yesterday was a real success story for the Tailteann Cup. Is 16,000 a big crowd? Is it not a big crowd when there's 4 teams winning? I'm not sure it is, but the quality of football, like, so often when we see these teams go to Croke Park, a Westmeath, they're playing against Dublin, and the players don't get to express themselves at all. They have to set up with a game plan that's ultra defensive, that's just try and protect themselves. Yet they go out yesterday, and it's the quality of points that they kicked throughout. Like, you're looking at Westmeath, which is probably what you want from the Tailteann Cup, saying, hey, why are these guys in the Tailteann Cup? Why are they in this scenario where they're in the Tailteann Cup? Because there just seemed to be so much talent there. And the first game, the Cavan-Sligo game, was one of the best games I've watched all year in Gaelic football. The attacking football, Cavan almost scored a goal. It was a brilliant save from the keeper in the end, just before half-time. It was the last play before half-time where they went from one end of the pitch to the other, 5-6 passes. It would have been one of the goals of the season if it had gone in. And yeah, both games were real attacking football. Cavan were much the better side, but just before half-time, Sligo had several goal chances. They hit the crossbar. There was a clearance off the line that if they got them, maybe it was a very different game. But this is what you want the Tailteann Cup to be. Evenly matched sides where the skillful players, the attacking players, can do what they're meant to do, what I'm sure they do at club level all the time. Why they've got to this stage where they're playing inter-county, where they have this ridiculous talent, and we rarely see it. Again, if you're Sligo, I know Cavan's a slightly different scenario where they've won a provincial title recently, but how often do we see Sligo players on national TV playing with the freedom that they played with yesterday? Generally, if you see them at all, they're up against Mayo or Galway or Roscommon, where they know they're the underdog, where they might kick 10-12 points at most during a game. Like, for them, it must be just such a game changer to have matches like this.
Yeah, and even when you've got those gems of players in those weaker teams, when they're getting hammered, you just don't pay any attention to them. And like, I think a lot of people have been very familiar with the Cavan team as a result of what happened in 2020, but I think yesterday was a bit of an exhibition for Sligo, and to a lesser degree maybe some of the players playing in the second match as well. It's not what it's about. They want to get a trophy. I think Westmeath beating Cavan in the final would be a bit of an upset as well, but it should be a cracker of a game. Just very finally then, the last in our performance rankings this morning is Dundalk, who have turned this thing on its head to a certain degree, but there's going to be no runaway title winner in the League of Ireland Premier Division just yet anyway.
No. So we had a clash of the top two on Friday night at Oriel Park. Shamrock Rovers, who went into the game with an 8-point lead over Dundalk. So Rovers win that game. They're 11 points clear at the top, and the title race is pretty much done at a perfect time for Shamrock Rovers, because they're starting the European campaign in the next fortnight. They're going to have matches week on week, it seems. So you think they can suddenly rotate their squad whatever way they want. Dundalk get the victory. Robbie Benson, sensational goal, cross from Macari. Lou Macari's grandson playing for Dundalk had this brilliant cross on the right hand side. Robbie Benson smashes it in with a volley, and suddenly Dundalk are 5 points back with a game in hand, and they are the team with all the momentum. Shamrock Rovers have lost 4 times in their opening 20 games. They've lost their last 2 away matches, both of them up in Louth against Dundalk and Drogheda. And now they've this very cramped fixture list as well, whereas Dundalk have won their last 5 matches. I think they've 22 points out of the last 24 since they were beaten by Shamrock Rovers in Tallaght. And I remember that night looking at Dundalk and thinking, you know, it's Stephen O'Donnell's first year in charge. There's clearly some signs that they're making progress, but they're a long way away. Like next season, the season after, maybe then they can compete with Shamrock Rovers. But Dundalk don't have European football and can rest players, and they have momentum. Rovers have Bohemians, which is obviously, you know, one of the biggest games of the season at what's going to be a sold-out Tallaght on Friday night. Dundalk, over the next 4 or 5 games, the fixture list certainly looks quite tempting for them. And, you know, as good as it is to have a great team in the League of Ireland, such as Shamrock Rovers, like the best thing for the league and promotion of the league is a title race. And you know, it's not that long ago, but since Dundalk and Shamrock Rovers, there was a proper old rivalry there. So if Dundalk can maintain this, I think for the league in general, it's a good thing. But 5 points behind, you know, still a bit of a gap for Shamrock Rovers.
Yeah, and Derry City, of course, drew with Drogheda United on Friday as well to lose a little bit of pace.
Yeah, Derry collapsed very much over the last 6-7 weeks.
For sure. So they're away to UCD on Friday. It's Rovers against Bows, as you mentioned, on Friday, and Dundalk are away to Shells. So, yeah, Dundalk in the green this morning, and that concludes this morning's Gillette Labs Performance Rankings.
OTB AM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.
All right, just to tell you that you can join us at the Silk and Thomas in Kildare Town tomorrow night from June 21st, as we'll be looking ahead to the Dubai Duty Free Irish Derby Festival at the Curragh Racecourse. We're going to be chatting to Irish Derby legends Michael Kinnan, Johnny Murtagh and Shamie Heffernan for an in-depth Irish Derby discussion and analysis and what it takes from horse to jockey to win the iconic race. You can see otbsports.com and our social channels to register. Now, after the break, we're going to be chatting to Eddie Brennan about the weekend's hurling quarter-finals. Before that, though, here's Clare boss Brian Lohan speaking about his side's dramatic late rally to overcome Wexford in those quarters. See you in a few.
You know, it's great to come out on the right side of the result. You know, to get the win. I suppose 2 weeks ago we were here and we didn't get the win. Yeah, there's a bit of relief there and a certain amount of satisfaction that when it was really put up to us that our lads played so well.
It was not exactly the perfect mix for preparation, was it?
Yeah, look, I suppose it just was what it was. You just have to get on with it. The boys were suspended and then they weren't suspended, so you know it was a downer, obviously, that they were suspended, and then a bit of a boost when they were cleared to play. And sure, look, I suppose it was a different kind of game for us to prepare for. We were favoured to win it, which was different for us, and probably didn't handle that as well as we could have, and didn't play well at all in the first half.
Now, back to the actual game itself. It was, I'm going to say the bench that won it for you, but they contributed when they all came on, especially Aaron Shanaher, who got 1-2 towards the end, and Tony Kelly obviously kind of got into it even more, scored 3 points from play at half, or in the second half. Shane O'Donnell did what Shane O'Donnell has been doing all year.
Yeah, look, tremendous performances from the lads that came in, but it has been coming a bit because, you know, they've been itching to get on, and they just haven't been able to get on because fellas have been playing well. So delighted for them. They're working as hard as everyone else, and they got the opportunity when, you know, we were up against it. And in fairness to them, they did the business.
And now you're going to Croke Park and facing Kilkenny.
Yeah, it's, you know, another big challenge, but something that we're really looking forward to. We haven't been there in a while, and we'll see how it goes.
You've been part of some great banner summers as a player. What's it like as a manager?
Yeah, well, look, you know, anyone that's inside that dressing room, you know, they want to represent their county as well as they possibly can. And, you know, the best place to represent your county is above in Croke Park. That's where everyone wants to be.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Football Pod on OTB Sports.
Do you still listen to the Football Pod, or is that like texting your ex?
Absolutely. As I often said, I'm jealous that O'Donoghue is so good, the little whore, but he's it's brilliant. I listened to the one yesterday. I thank God for Tommy Rooney. So I won't say that too often, but thank God for him. At least he stood up for me a bit. But the two boys were very big on Kerry yesterday.
The Football Pod is available every Tuesday exclusively on the OTB Sports app.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong? Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves. Oh, really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie, we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match. Because somewhere out there, there's someone for you. And GoDating.ie will help you find them. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
You're very welcome back. It is 8:15. You're with us here on OTB AM. It was All-Ireland hurling quarter-final day at Semple Stadium on Saturday. It finished Clare 124, Wexford 314 and Galway 219, Cork 121. So it's going to be Galway against Limerick in one semi-final, Clare against Kilkenny in the other semi-final in a couple of weeks' time. Delighted to welcome Kilkenny legend Eddie Brennan back to the show. Eddie, how are you getting on?
Not too bad at all, Owen. How's the form? You well?
Yeah, very well. Let's start with that Clare versus Wexford game, and I guess we can break this into two parts. The part where Clare looked mediocre, tired, I don't know how you want to describe it, and the part where they were absolutely sensational. So those first 57 minutes where they essentially lose those first 57 minutes by 6 points, why do you think that happened?
I suppose they had a lot going on. The last fortnight, there was obviously the psychological hangover that was coming from losing a Munster final. And, you know, there was obviously a little bit of off-field stuff which was out of their control to a degree. But that can just take the energy of the group a little bit. And when you combine all that with, you know, we have to give Wexford credit here. They came with a plan. They got their matchups right. I think there was so much they got right on the day. And, you know, it was possibly the fact that at some stage, you know, Clare were never going to give up. I think that's one trait that is in this Clare team under Brian Lohan. They struggled yesterday for large periods, but they just kept at it. And then, you know, and that's the mark of a good team, that when the opportunities arise coming down the straight and they kind of have a little bit of a gap to go for, they went for it because, you know, and Wexford were game. I think they were absolutely brilliant. You know, maybe a decision, you know, there was a potential for a penalty there. It could have swung the game. Wexford looked as if they were coming at, you know, they were in a commanding position, but ultimately, like, a loss of someone like Rory O'Connor is a big, big loss to someone like Wexford, because you need all hands on deck. And I think even Dara said it himself afterwards. You know, they went right down into their squad because it was a high octane match. There was a lot of sore bodies, I'd imagine, afterwards, and just unfortunately they lost some of their key players who had done excellent jobs. And then, you know, you'd say the shackles came off Tony Kelly and Shane O'Donnell towards the ends from their markers, and they suddenly came to life.
When Brian Lohan looks back at the tape of those minutes where Clare struggled a little bit, when he looks at the O'Keefe's, the sweeper with the man-marking job that Shane Wreck did on Tony Kelly, what can he take from those instances and how he could potentially free his Clare forwards up a little bit better in the semi-final?
Yeah, they probably have to look at just being able to tweak their game, you know, in the middle of a game, which is not an easy thing to do. You know, it's just to identify that straight away and change it up. And look, it might be a little bit left field, but, you know, do you dump Tony Kelly in on the edge of the square? You know, is that something that counteracts what the opposition are doing? You know, because, you know, you take even Devitt, you know, followed Ryan Taylor out the field and done a superb job on him. So sometimes we don't like to deviate. If you sit down and you make a plan, it's very difficult to come away from that because of what the opposition are doing. And that's obviously the trick of management and coaching. But it probably would be a brave thing to do. So it just has probably given Brian Lohan a little bit of food for thought that, you know, if someone, you know, even looking ahead, you know, is Mikey Butler potentially going to be the one to tail, you know, Tony Kelly? So you just have to put an extra little bit of thought into that, because generally Tony Kelly is well able to win his battles, you know, with guys he's marking, or he definitely can go to the 71st or 73rd minute. But yeah, it'll just have given Brian a little bit of food for thought. But I think the overriding thing for Clare is it was relief. I felt this was the dangerous match for them. I think they were going to get met with huge energy from Wexford, and now they have a clear run. You know, they've no distractions. They can just solely focus on All-Ireland semi-final, which is what I think was his overriding feeling afterwards, and almost relief.
Would it be a concern for Brian Lohan then, the job that Shane Wreck did on Tony Kelly and the impact it seemed to have on Clare overall, not just on Tony Kelly and the missed frees from Tony Kelly. Maybe mentally it got to him as well. He wasn't having things his own way, but quite often when we're talking about man-marking Tony Kelly as well, if you man-mark Tony Kelly, it's going to free up other areas and it'll give the likes of Shane O'Donnell a bit more space and Peter Duggan to drop deep and be more influential. That didn't seem to happen either. By stopping Tony Kelly, it almost seemed to curtail the entire Clare attacking performance.
Yeah, I think the presence of Dee O'Keefe, and what Dee O'Keefe didn't try to do was he didn't try to be everywhere. I think he just shut down a flank. He shut down the kind of two flank for a while, and then he maybe switched to the far side in the second half because I think he had a little fumble that was obviously costly for Shanahan's point. So they were basically allowing, Clare to have one side of the defence, and after that the men were touch tight. But I think what probably helped, is Clare got such an injection off their bench. Meehan came in, Rogers came in, and sure, obviously Shanahan got one too. And again, he's such a big abrasive fella, he's a handful. But yeah, Brian will definitely want to look at it from that point of view and say, look, how do we get Tony on the ball? Because obviously he's a key man. But I think the important point Owen there just said, they aren't a one-man band either. I think Clare have a real strong squad. And I think that's probably the key to them. And I think that's what will have pleased Brian, is that they were able to go to their bench and spring a few lads. But definitely look, it'll be a different challenge the next day against Kilkenny.
So that spell between obviously the 57 minutes and the full-time whistle is what wins this for Clare. You've mentioned some of the impact subs, that 1-6 without reply in an 8-minute spell, of course. I mean, you've got Shanahan contributing a huge amount of that. Did you see anything else? Did you see a tactical shift at all from either team that allowed the floodgates to open?
Not really. I think there was just more energy levels. Like Dee O'Keefe going off, then you'd say, look, was that significant? Wreck was I suppose to take the pun, really, he was wrecked at that stage. He had put in such a shift following Tony Kelly around. But I think, look, it's cruel to mention these little bits and pieces, but I think if you look at the goalkeeping even yesterday, Iver Quilligan got away with a little bit of a mistake. One, he didn't know whether to come and tack the ball, and then it floated through. But for Mark Fanning, I'm certainly not going to criticise any goalkeepers, because I was fired out of the goal when I was 14, and that was the end of my career in goal. It's just horrible to play in goal, and I have such respect for goalkeepers. But, you drop one ball that, you can have the best game of your life, and, Mark Fanning dropped two yesterday. The second one came at a big price. And especially when you have guys like Aaron Shanahan, he plays in around the square so much, and it can be just so cruel. But and it was just literally a lapse in concentration. And I think you sometimes get that in championship matches. You sometimes get that when lads are tired and fatigued and everything, and there's so much pressure on the line that just one little lapse, in concentration. And we're talking about dropping off just 2 or 3%. I think Mark Fanning was probably going into mode of, where am I going with this ball as soon as I catch it? And he just, dropped it. And then he managed to scramble it because it almost got in. And then, once it broke, it's just a lottery after that when his body's around the square. And that was a huge moment.
Is that just a sense of occasion that got to a lot of those keepers at the weekends, in a packed Thurles knockout? And is that the commonality between all the instances, or was this just a freak afternoon, do you think?
It could be a bit of a freak afternoon that they all seem to get a little dose of the yips, save Eoin Murphy. But it's, I don't know, I think it's just coincidental maybe. But, for them, the margins are so thin for a goalkeeper. Even a cornerback can make a mistake and slip up once. Or, midfielders can miss a ball loads of times. But for goalkeepers, it's just such a unique thing. They just it's such a fine line for them, the width of a post, the width of a hurl, the ball deflects off somebody else, they're the margins, and you can't legislate for that. You can't plan for that. They're just one of these things that happen in a game of hurling where there's so many incidents that can have such an impact. And yeah, look, you can turn around and say, look, they're humans at the end of the day, and a human error sometimes. And look, you wouldn't be harsh on them. They're just part and parcel of the game, and it just was part of the story for me yesterday, was that there were, mistakes with goalkeepers that turned out to be costly.
When you talk about humans and human error, you could imagine, I'd say, a few of the Wexford people pointing towards the human error that might have been made by the referee on Saturday afternoon as well, and the lack of a penalty and black card in that incident laid on with Lee Chin. There was some talk in the Sunday game last night about referees trying to visualise a 25-metre line from the sideline and calls for a line to actually be painted on the pitch in future to try and help referees out. A, was it the wrong decision in your opinion, and B, should referees be getting that extra help, that extra line painted on the pitch come the next round?
Yeah, I thought, Liam articulated the argument very, very well and made the point so well. But I find it bizarre that officials would be instructed to imagine or to guess roughly where that 25, bring it in 25 metres. If that's the rule, bring it in, paint it in, and that's it. It's clear, it's black and white as such in terms of the area you have to be in. That takes out some of the guesswork for referees, which I just hate. You just don't ever go there with guesswork. But then, the incident itself, I just think when a defender makes no attempt whatsoever to tackle a guy and just literally wrapped him up like he did, that is the reason it was brought in, because he knows the consequences of, maybe trying to go honest here and see, can I hook or dispossess Lee Chin in that situation? He knows that he's the one at the disadvantage. So therefore, you have to reward the attacker. And again, look, we'll say I felt there was a similar incident in the Leinster final as well. And, you'd be just questioning, have they just completely forgotten about the black book? Because I thought when defenders or any player knows this is the consequences of my action and they roll the dice, then they can't have any arguments. And I think Wexford people are quite rightly grieved on that yesterday. And I'm not trying to take away from Clare. Clare went and won that match when they had to. But at that point in time, it was a huge moment, and I think definitely I can understand where they're going with it. But I would just like, if you're going to put a rule in place, be as definitive or as clear as you can with it. And I also, again, I will echo a point that I've made for a number of years. Would it not be handy for the referee, for Padraig Dwyer, to have somebody there say, can you just check that for me? It'll only take 30 seconds. Did the defender make any form of an effort? And yes, there was two covering Clare lads on the way back. But when Lee Chin got possession of that ball, he was in that zone and there was only one thing on his mind. And I think it was the wrong call in hindsight. I think Wexford probably should have had a penalty. Maybe I'm being biased to the forwards from my old days.
It's more the greater issue of referees have sort of been hung out to dry here. You wouldn't in any other sport say, well, in football, we're not going to put in a line for the penalty box. You can sort of figure it out yourself and guess and imagine. We all know where the 18-yard box is. It's a very fine margin, and these are huge games that the referee needs to know exactly how many metres something is, because the difference between a penalty and a free is literally the difference between a place in an All-Ireland quarter-final or an All-Ireland semi-final. Having someone in the ear, the referee, the VAR in hurling, of any sport, it feels like you'd have 40 stoppages. Yeah,
I know. I suppose I've heard that point made, but I just still think if we're not going to be using it all the time, but I think if the referee wants an extra little bit of information or an extra bit of clarity on something like that, I mean, we're trying to support them. Like you said, I agree wholeheartedly. The pressure on them is outrageous. And again, turn around and point the finger at them for a team costing the season. That's not right, and we don't want that. But I think the referees board or whoever it is should be trying to put in, supports and be as clear and as definitive as they can on these things, with the overall view of protecting referees and saying, listen, we want to take the heat out of them in relation to being a lonely figure having to make that call. And I think they're brave in that they'll make those calls. But I do think if there's scope there for that capacity, just to check it, if he wants to check it, because you could see Lee Chin making the argument with him, afterwards. And I don't know what that conversation was. I'd only imagine he was probably saying to him, I was inside an area. Do players even know there's a 25-metre area? I don't know. So, but I think if, like you said there, Eoin, you have to be definitive. You have to be clear. There's no guesswork at all. And I just found it a very unusual thing that officials will be given that type of instruction. It just seems a little bit out there.
Would the umpire on the left-hand side not have had the best view of the whole thing?
Yeah, he possibly should have been the one to maybe make that call or have those conversations. And look, we're saying that now in hindsight. I don't know. And again, it just maybe, that teamwork that goes on between a ref and his officials. And it's even for Pod Dwyer to just take a second there and be able to go talk to his officials or whatever. I don't know. That would seem, best practice. But look, in the heat of the moment there, is one voice better than two? Is three heads better than one? In terms of decision making there and maybe what they can feed in. But yes, you would imagine ideally the umpire should be very proactive there and help the referee with that decision.
Just to finish up on the Clare game, if I can get you to put your Kilkenny hat on for a moment, are you more nervous that Clare actually won that game as opposed to say the muscle memory of playing Wexford in an All-Ireland semi-final?
Yeah, I wasn't sure because I think Kilkenny in the last number of years have been struggling with Wexford. And this Wexford group are very confident taking on Kilkenny. They enjoy taking on Kilkenny and they're not afraid of Kilkenny. So equally, I suppose one or the other wasn't any better really. But yeah, I do. I'd be nervous as a Kilkenny person. I think this is a big challenge because Clare have sole focus now on Kilkenny. Croke Park is a place that I think will definitely suit their game. I think they have guys that will relish the chance to run around Croke Park. I think it was maybe 2018 when they had that epic semi-final against Galway. Peter Duggan, Tony Kelly and these guys. So they will look forward to this. And I think they have a lot of young lads that will be chomping at the bit now. And like I said, they have a clear runway now. So I think they have guys that can hurt Kilkenny. But equally, I think these are the kind of matches that a Brian Cody team, any team prepared by Brian Cody, and they love this occasion. And I think it's a glorious opportunity. Kilkenny won't fear Clare either.
It's going to be Galway against Limerick in the other semi-final. Galway got the better of Cork in today's first game on Saturday. Cork with a load of regrets after that. The 12 wides by half-time is the really stark statistic. Just to touch on Galway first before we get into Cork. As a corner forward, looking at that Galway full back line, how horrific would they be to play against, first of all?
Yeah, they're a good unit. I'd probably take my chances on Grealish or Morrissey. I don't know, would I like to go in wrestling with Dahi for 70 minutes. He's a hardy root, so he is. And you just have to admire him. But I think as a unit, they're really good. Like Grealish went off out the fields, tracking, and I thought done really well, found himself in really good positions. Yeah, he had the long range goal, which was, a little bit of a fluke really. But he also found himself high up the field for opportunities there where he could have, impacted the match even more. But as a unit, I think they work so well, and it's obviously dependent on then where Pádraig Mannion sits in that. I thought Pádraig Mannion played really well yesterday, but that axis of Dahi Burke, Mannion, and even David Burke yesterday, I thought was really important for Galway. But they set the tone early. I think while Cork probably will definitely rue the missed opportunities and kind of left Galway in that match, I still think Galway looked like they wanted it a little bit more. I just thought I thought their body language, I thought even their endeavour, like they just scrapped for absolutely everything. And I just thought, with the opportunities Cork missed, like even there was two gilt-edged goal opportunities there in the first half that Fitzgibbon missed, Alan Connolly missed, and then you had Robbie O'Flynn coming through with a half one that you just have to be so cold and ruthless with those, and they come at a huge price for Cork today.
It felt like with a couple of those goal opportunities as well, they gave the Galway keeper a decent chance to save them, even though they were obviously good saves in all the occasions. Like as I say, that 12 wides by half time at a point then when they bring Patrick Horgan on is something that may sting a few Cork supporters. Like, I guess the two questions are, was half time too late to bring Patrick Horgan on, and I guess should he have been in the team from the first place?
Yeah, sure, look, now it looks like it was an awful mistake, because we sit up this morning and that's just Kieran Kingston makes those decisions. That's what a manager does, and he probably had good reason for that. But I still think, look, to be fair, Lehan had been going well. I think he'd been hitting his frees fairly well. But look, just my view would have been that, look, I still think Patrick Horgan fully focused. And look, the Cork management are the only ones that know that. They see him night in, night out. And while he has been exceptional over the last decade or more, I still think, you know, you judge a guy on how he's going in training, and that's obviously been the reason for that. But look, when you look at the frees that were missed there yesterday, you definitely say that those frees are ones that Hoggy would generally nail. So was it a case of, you know, it was too late maybe when they brought him on? I don't think so. I still think Cork had ample opportunities. You know, even the two that broke down off the post. I mean, there was no Cork attacker, you know, taking that chance. They were just a fraction slow to react, you know, to those chances. And those are, you know, opportunities that, you know, an inside forward has to hang around for and make a nuisance of yourself. And you look at the opposite, like with the likes of Conor Whelan, like he's just so dangerous and he's so game for a physical challenge as well.
You mentioned in the Irish Independent this morning that Cork are catfishing their fans at the moment. do you think the real Cork will stand up over the next little while? And where will that get them? Like this generation of young hurlers that are coming through, my sense is that they are potential All-Ireland winners. Is that just because they're from Cork? I'm thinking that, and maybe I'm overrating them a little bit?
No, I do. I think there's definitely a group of lads there, but I just think, look, desire to me is a big word, like, and you say, how much do they really, really want it? You know, because I just thought yesterday Galway looked like they wanted it a little bit more, and you'd say maybe they won it because of Cork's, you know, inability to convert their chances, but they still got over the line. And I think in Joyce they have a brilliant centre back. I felt all year, I think it has been probably changed their season a little bit by putting him in there and putting Coleman on the wing. But I just think there's probably not enough steel. I think that area of being able to go in there and get hurt. I mean, they have all the skills in the world, and if you wanted to go watch an exhibition match in the morning, that's probably, you know, they have all the skills. There's some brilliant players there, but you know, they just need a few guys they need to really get the bit between their teeth. And I just, you know, maybe I'm just living in the past a tiny bit here, but I look at the Cork teams that we played against, and by God, they had steel. You know, they were able to get a job done, and that's the trick. It's maybe it's a psychological thing, but I think in Joyce and guys like Robbie O'Flynn, Alan Connolly, I think they definitely have, you know, guys that are well good enough. What I love about Joyce is he's for a guy just shy of his 20th birthday. He is physically, you know, stuck into everything. He's able to catch high ball, which is, again, something that we don't really associate with our centre-backs modern day. You know, he's really strong in the air and just does the simple things so well. But yeah, Cork they've work to do, but they definitely have the ingredients there. But like I said there, I think the defensive unit needs to still the full-back position still presents a big challenge.
That steeliness issue is probably key then for Cork progressing, and whether it's a psychological thing or whether it's just a physical thing, that they're simply not spending enough time in the gym and simply aren't getting to the level that Limerick are. And I know some of the conversations we've had on the show over the past 6 weeks about Cork is that they aren't at it physically, that they maybe just simply aren't putting the same effort in that some of the other counties are to bulk themselves up. If it is that, like, that's just a new coach coming in, a new backroom team, and sorting that out. And like, if the skill level is there, like this, and the underage success is there, like, this is a pretty attractive job if Kieran Kingston does decide to go.
Yeah, it is. It does. It holds huge appeal. And if, you know, hypothetically, if Kieran Kingston were to go, I don't know, like, I think maybe is Ben O'Connor the one that looks to be best positioned to step in there, Nate, and I'm not sure. But yeah, I'm not sure it's just solely the physical conditioning. I mean, I think a lot of these are young guys, and last year in the All-Ireland final, it definitely looked like physical conditioning, you know, went against them. But I also think it's mindset as much as anything else. Like, I mean, I think, you know, if you look at some of the, you know, over the years, like, you know, some of the best hurlers weren't the biggest, you know. It's not so much the size of the dog, really. It's the size of the fight, I think, and there's a bit of both there. But I just think, you know, in the example I looked at, you know, yesterday was, you know, a couple of times they worked the ball away from contact and they went over and back in front of the goal and then down the wing, and it looked lovely. I mean, if Mark Coleman had to put that ball over the bar, you're going, wow, that's an incredible score. But it still took, you know, energy, 6 or 7 passes out from their own defence, and then it went wide, and straight from the puck out, Galway, you know, hit David Burke, they hit their forward, and the ball was over the bar. And sometimes, look, I think there was an article done there last week on Cork's efficiency. that's what probably ultimately bit him in the arse yesterday. Like, they just weren't efficient. They didn't convert, and they have to tidy that up. And I think that's mindset as much as anything else. Like, even Darragh Fitzgibbon going in with that goal, like, I mean, you expect someone of his calibre to just hang that ball up in the net. Like, I mean, he needed to take maybe another, and I'm talking hindsight, and that's great. I wasn't there at that moment in time, but I think when you get in those opportunities and you're bearing down a goal inside the 14, that ball has to be put away from the goalkeeper. You just place it along the ground or pass it into one of the corners, and he just made I think Éanna Murphy is possibly going to jump into the All-Star driving seat with the saves yesterday.
With Sarah O'Donovan on the show on Thursday night, a former All-Ireland winner with Cork. I'm having that moment where I can't remember whether she said this on air or off air, so I'm going to screw her either way and say, you know what, we're going to put this out there. She said, I'd love to see Eddie Brennan go in Cork. What are the chances?
No, I'd say my only connection was I was born in Cork, Fado, and
so the passport.
There was but no, I don't think I'd make customs at the moment now. But look, Jesus, as a coach looking in from the outside, you would definitely say the raw materials are there, and I would have felt, look, someone I thought like Dermot O'Sullivan being in there, I thought, here's a guy who knows how to anchor a defence and how to, and I'm not saying for a second, did he fail him or whatever else it is, but I just felt, if you're young guys and you're in there as Cork guys looking up to someone who put it all on the line for Cork, you'd surely be inspired by a guy like him. But I do think there's good lads down there. I think, should Kieran Kingston step away, I personally feel, looking in from the outside, that Ben O'Connor has done a good bit of work coaching down there. Is it someone like his time to maybe marry that? Because I thought he had that running, skillful game, himself and Jerry, that kind of, you recall how effective that was. But equally, Ben O'Connor was a tough competitor and he wasn't afraid to get stuck in either. So maybe a fresh voice, maybe new ideas is potentially what's needed down there now. But I still think it was very brave of Kieran Kingston to go back in a second time. I think that's not an easy decision to make.
Hypothetically speaking, what are the best jobs out there for a young hurling manager?
You can ask Tommy this as well, or a few others. Look, I would always look at every setup. I think you look in from the outside and you just go, is there guys in there you'd like to work with? I mean, you look at what Limerick are doing at the moment. Clare, there's so many attractive propositions. I think, to be fair too, I equally think, and I've spoken a bit tongue-in-cheek about even the Tipperary job. Like, I mean, I still think that if you're an aspiring Tipperary manager who believes you can do it, I think there's a decent crew of lads to put a 2 or 3 year project together. So, but yeah, look, that Cork group, I think there's a forward unit there, and I think, would you like to think, we'd all like to think that you do, a really good job, but definitely the ingredients are there, I think, from a forward perspective. But I think, look, Cork's issue is probably just consolidating the defence more so. Would I like to work with them? You would if I was from Cork.
You were born there. You just you never said that when you were playing for Kilkenny, did you?
I'm not from Cork. I was born in Cork. That's the difference, and it's passing through.
We got to stop doing this on a Monday morning. We were trying to get Anthony Moyles the me job last week. We're doing ourselves out of our best pundits.
That's it. Yeah, we are agents.
I don't fall into that category, lads.
Very quickly, Eddie, who's going to be playing in the All Ireland hurling final this year?
I said kind of after the Munster final, I wouldn't be shocked if we get a repeat of that, and I won't be either. But I still think, look, I maybe being a small bit biased here, but I do think Kilkenny will prevail there. I think they have a lot of work to do. I think they have a lot of questions that need to be answered if they are to beat that Clare team. They're going to have to pull out a hell of a performance. But I think they will be facing whoever gets through there. It will be Limerick in the final. I think Galway will throw it down to them. But I still think they probably haven't enough David Burks to go around. I think they have some good players, but like when you see someone like him, and I rate him really, really highly. But he came in there yesterday, and I think, with 5 or 6 minutes to go, maybe he came off. But I could see Henry checking with him, was he okay to stay going? And I just think with what Limerick bring in energy, I just think they mightn't have enough of him to go around, and I think maybe for large periods they'll keep it pucked out to him. And I think with 15 minutes to go, I would imagine I'd expect Limerick to kick home and win by a couple of 6-7 points. But hurling's a funny game, you just don't know. But it's hard to see them stopping Limerick getting to that final.
Eddie, just before we let you go, just awful news over the weekend around Tyrone GAA and Damien Casey, who tragically passed away at the age of 29. Obviously a name that a lot of people would have been very familiar with, despite not having seen a whole pile of him play. I mean, for somebody to kind of exceed in a county that's not one of the traditional powerhouses of hurling was quite something. Just awful news over the weekend. Yeah, just shocking news. And again, I suppose my own knowledge of it is just the story that has transpired over the weekend, which is just heartbreaking, really, because for his family and his teammates, from my reading of it, it would appear that he was a hugely popular guy, very well got in Tyrone hurling circles, and it's just an awful tragedy. And your thoughts will go out to his teammates, the community, and his family. Eddie Brennan, great stuff this morning. Thanks a million for being with us. No bother, lads. Take care. Eddie Brennan there on the line. We are going to turn our attention to sports news right now, actually. And we have Colin Mullaney in studio. Colin, how are you getting on?
We're expecting a nice sports news sting. Colin should have his own sting.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. It says on my doc, no sting. So if I just read what was in the screen in front of me, I would have known that, but I didn't. Carl, how are you getting on?
I'm all good. How are you?
Were you up late, Jules, screening the golf as well last night?
I was watching some of the golf yesterday, yeah. More frustration for McIlroy, I guess. Just the soft bogeys that he made. I mean, when you look at the front nine, the two short par fours, he makes bogey on both of those, and then the 11th, the par 3. I know these short holes can be tricky and finicky, but do the top players, when they're really in contention, bogey those sort of holes? I'm not sure. But he spoke afterwards. I was watching his press conference this morning that he feels like his game is in really good shape. So, his last two performances in major championships have been good, generally speaking. So hopefully he can make the breakthrough at St Andrews next month.
His driving killed him throughout Saturday, Sunday. The TV coverage was a big talking point on Golf Weekly yesterday, particularly on Saturday night, where there were large periods of not seeing what was happening. But it also meant that you didn't really get a full sense of where McIlroy was in trouble a lot of the time. You just saw the drive going left, and it was a big miss left that he had throughout the last couple of days. His recovery play was exceptional. His putting was exceptional, but yeah, listen, maybe because he was so good in the greens, it overshadows what put him out of the tournament. But I think, like St Andrews, he just must be licking his lips to get St Andrews now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it should play right into his hands. But I guess a lot of the players will be licking their lips at St Andrews too, which is the other thing. And if you look at the leaderboard last night, a lot of the top players were in the top 6 or 8 as well. So it's not going to be easy to break down that barrier again at St Andrews.
That is the difficulty, I think, for Rory, and the one thing that has changed. I'm not sure I go along with the Rory's best is better than everybody else's best right now. Like, there's so many good quality solid players who can do what he can do, who can bomb it a long way, who can chip well, who can putt well. Like, you look at that leaderboard, it was absolutely stacked last night with some of the best players in the world. And Fitzpatrick, Zalatoris, Scheffler again is having one of the great seasons that anyone has had since Tiger Woods. So the problem for Rory going to St Andrews is, while he is in good form, there's an awful lot of good players who'll also be looking at St Andrews thinking, like, if that wind doesn't blow.
Well, that's the other thing. If the wind does blow, it brings a lot of players into contention, I would think, that mightn't ordinarily be in contention, and will rule out some players that might be in contention if the weather is reasonably calm. And McIlroy, generally speaking, isn't quite a good wind player with a high ball flight that he's traditionally had, so he'll need a bit of luck on the draw and the weather side of things. But given that St Andrews is quite short, he should have loads of opportunities, and if he can keep the putter hot again, he should be right in the mix. But again, I mean, if he doesn't get over the line at St Andrews, he's had a reasonably good year, and he obviously won the Canadian Open, but if he doesn't win a major, is it a good year? Probably not.
Well, that is the constant conundrum of Rory McIlroy. Like, we do judge him to a higher standard, and I think we're right to judge him to a higher standard with what he achieved so early in his career. It'll be 9 years then, and there's more quality players coming through, so it does feel as though it becomes more difficult with every passing major, and particularly when he's in good form.
Yeah.
Particularly, it feels as though he's going to St Andrews with no, there's no first round issues anymore. There's no final round issues. He's sort of played well at every part of a major now. There shouldn't be anything mentally there. It's just actually going and putting it all together.
Yeah, and you mentioned the wider picture as well. Like, if you look at Matt Fitzpatrick and the level of improvement that he has made in the last 5 years, it is just astronomical. And he's added yardage, he's tidied up all parts of his game, and I know he had a good amateur career, obviously, and had some big wins in his amateur career.
He won the US Amateur.
Yeah,
they should have mentioned that, shouldn't they?
But I don't think you would have picked him out, say, when he broke onto the circuit. I know he's had some big wins, but as a major champion, I'm not sure. When you consider Poulter, Westwood, all of those guys of a British persuasion that were in the mix for major titles at that time, you wouldn't have picked him out from the pack. So I think it's a really, really good win for the underdog as well. And he's only 27, and he made quite a brash comment that he wants to get to 6 major titles.
Wow, become the most successful European.
Yeah.
Well, that's where Rory should be. Like, I always think he was never going to be Tiger Woods, but Rory Mcilroy on talent deserves to be the greatest European golfer of all time. He should surpass Seve and Nick Faldo. Like, when he got to 4 that quickly.
Do you think he's more talented than Seve?
I've seen all the highlights of Seve, and he was obviously an absolute genius in a different way and expressed it in a different way. But I think in terms of majors, that Rory's consistency, like, I don't want a headline of failure, but like, I think even I remember talking to Padraig Harrington, he would have felt that McIlroy should get to 6-7 majors, and that should be his thing. That when we look back in 50 years' time, this guy was the greatest most successful European golfer of all time. There's obviously still a huge amount of time for him to do it, but I think that's where I'd like to see him get to now.
He'll probably go down. 2022 will probably go down as the one that got away if he doesn't win a major this year, given how close he was in everything.
Yeah, the Masters was a more typical Rory, where he comes charging on the final day, and obviously the hole out on 18 gives this great moment. But he's had chances in the last 2. This weekend, I think, will be a big regret, because he didn't need to go and shoot 64. No. He just needed to drive the ball a little bit better. Fitzpatrick's, he was sort of seen as someone who's maybe going to miss out on modern golf because he wasn't long off the tee, but he's had a huge improvement over the last year. He's added massive speed to his game. He was asked about it afterwards in the press conference. He had a little bit of a pop, I think, at potentially Bryson, where he was being compared to Bryson's sort of improvement in ball speed, and he was like, no, and I've been drug tested and everything, so it's all fine.
Yeah, he undertook some program, I think, or something. I'll have to read more about it, but he's, as you say, he's added speed, and the difference that's made, I think, was 10 or 12 yards even, is the difference of a club, which can be such a difference when you're playing into the green, especially in those small greens that were at Brookline as well. So, you have to be delighted for him, and for his caddy as well, Billy Foster. I couldn't believe that he hasn't won a major title already. And he was on the bag for Seve at one stage, so it's hard to believe. And that was a big deal for Sky last night as well. He got a lot of coverage.
He certainly did. Carl, where are we starting this morning in terms of sports news?
Well, let's go to the Lpga Tour, because Leona Maguire actually came very close to a title last night herself. That was at the Meyer Classic in Michigan. The Cavan native forcing her way into a 3-way playoff after a final round of 65 helped her finish on 18 under par. But Jennifer Kupcho won the playoff with a birdie on the second extra hole. Maguire finishing in a tie for second alongside Nelly Corda. In Gaelic games, Meath safely through to the quarter-final stage of the All-Ireland Ladies Senior Football Championship. They maintained their unbeaten start to this year's competition with a 9 points apiece draw with Armagh yesterday. Mayo beat Cavan by a point to progress, while Dublin are also through following a 111 to 6 points win over Tipperary. Elsewhere, Cork beat Donegal by 212 to 110, and Galway were 118 to 4 points winners over Westmeath. Westmeath and Cavan, meanwhile, will contest the first ever Tailteann Cup final. Both counties came through the respective semi-final ties at Croke Park yesterday. Westmeath beat neighbours Offaly by 322 to 216. Cavan getting the better of Sligo by 20 points to 114. The Republic of Ireland beat the Philippines 1-0 in their international friendly in Turkey yesterday. Debutant Lily Agg scoring the only goal of the game there in the first half. Europe House side now turning their attention to next Monday's World Cup qualifier away to Georgia.
I don't know if you saw the game yesterday. It was live on YouTube. There was no commentary, which meant you could hear everything that was being said around the pitch. And the Philippines coach, he's an Australian. He was the Australian national team manager for a while and got sacked in somewhat controversial circumstances, though I think he was proven right in the end and shouldn't have been got rid of. Philippines have already qualified for the World Cup. Bloody hell, he was loud. I think it was Serena who was the striker for the Philippines, would have had a very, very bad pain in her head afterward. He never stopped. It's so much so they had to turn down the volume halfway through, because I think he was going to get himself in trouble. He was going mental about Ireland stealing a couple of metres on a throw-in at one stage. Real sarcastic. Like one of these real old school coaches, like never stop shouting. Voice gone by the end of the match. absolutely insane. But it was a good performance from Ireland. Denise O'Sullivan didn't play. She's still playing over in America because it's sort of out of the international break. I scored an unbelievable goal yesterday. I don't know if you saw it. You should check it out online. It was her first ever regular season goal for the Courage. Chested down, volleys from about 25 yards out. But it was a good win for Ireland yesterday. I thought Jessica Zhu was brilliant on the right hand side. Maybe she might force a way, and she's obviously gone over to England. And Lily Agg, on her debut, played really well in general. Got the goal as well. So we'll have that game live here on Off the Ball. It's a 5 o'clock kickoff, so it'll be on Sports Radio next Monday. It's a game they'll win. Like, they beat Georgia.
You think it's guaranteed? I was going to ask.
Well, if they don't, listen, these players talk about the Ukraine defeat. Now, Ukraine are a hell of a lot better than Georgia are. If you don't beat Georgia, even away from home, and it's like it's a tough old trip. It's, I think, 2 hours outside Tbilisi where they're playing the match. But they've got everything they wanted. They've been in Turkey. They're going to be in Turkey for nearly 2 weeks in a training camp ahead of this game against Georgia, who they beat 11-0 last time. So if you don't beat Georgia, they'll only have themselves to blame for not qualifying, because it's in their hands now after the draw against Sweden to get that playoff spot.
Yeah, it's a huge summer for them, isn't it? A huge rest of the year for them. I think it's just on the brink of a huge explosion as well if they can get to the tournament.
Well, September is massive, so they have the game against Sweden and the game against Finland. Like, Finland at home, I would expect is, the game against, they play Finland at home and then they play Slovakia away, which could be a difficult one. But Finland at home at Tala, I think this time they need to get the full house at Tala for that, and then you go into a playoff series, which is if you were confused by the Nations League, you're going to get very confused about the playoffs for the Women's World Cup. There's one possibility where they end up going to Australia next February, for a mini tournament with 12 teams basically scrapping out for 3 places, and they won't know. There's no way of knowing where you're going to be in the playoff until basically every step of it's done, because you're seeded. It's unbelievably confusing.
Let's hope it's a bridge they cross and, I guess, go to Australia, fly home, go to Australia again next year. That would be the ideal scenario. So Ireland against Georgia, that is one to keep an eye on over the next couple of days. It is next Monday, isn't it? 5 o'clock. We'll have live commentary on OTB Sports Radio. Anything else, Carl, before we wrap up?
Just in Formula 1, the defending champion Max Verstappen has extended his lead in this year's Drivers' Championship. That's after winning the Canadian Grand Prix. The Red Bull driver held off the challenge of second place Carlos Sainz of Ferrari to pick up his 7th win of the season. Second in the championship, Charles Leclerc came from the back of the grid to finish 5th, but he's now 49 points behind Verstappen, and Lewis Hamilton finished in 3rd to record his first podium finish since the opening race of the year.
Colin Mullaney, great stuff. Thanks a million.
Thanks, lads.
It's 8:56. You're with us here on OTB AM, which is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. And there were plenty of finals on over the course of the weekend. In rugby, Alan Quinlan was watching them all. Alan, how are you getting on?
Good on yourself.
Yeah, very well. Let's just focus on the Super Rugby final and the URC final. 2 very, very different games of rugby, I think it's fair to say, on Saturday, but the outpouring of emotion was similar at the end of both. And if we were worried at the start of the year about people caring about the URC or not caring enough about it, I think that question has been answered pretty phenomenally over the last 2 weekends.
Yeah, it has. I think obviously I'm not sure it was the best game to watch. The Stormers against the Bulls, they're both trying to cancel each other out. The Bulls were so dominant, I think, early on, but couldn't score in that first half. And complete turnaround. The Stormers in the second half were brilliant. And I was just trying to think, is this good for the league? The two South African teams at the final, and it's
but the scenes, the fans, the crowd, even though it wasn't a full stadium, the colour that those fans bring to the competition, that element of it is unquestionably good, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I'm just asking the question, what would people be thinking? Because I think having South African teams in the URC the first year and 2 in the final, and the Stormers winning it, of course it is. It's brilliant to see. I think they'll only get better. I think, look at the way they started the league. South Africans, they were coming straight from the Currie Cup, missing all their internationals. I think the challenge for everyone else is to, step up. I think it makes the league way more competitive. Going to South Africa is going to get even more difficult. I think they'll build on the back of this, the South African teams,
and Alan appears to have frozen. mid-sentence there.
What was he going to
the
say
URC
next?
final.
Send in your text now.
Yeah, I was just going to ask him what the concerns were around the URC. So you have Blues against Crusaders in the Super Rugby final as well. A few of the All Blacks on show ahead of the Ireland Tour. The Ireland team has flown out to New Zealand at this point. So
are you on flight radar tracking?
Yeah, just making sure they get out of here safely. It'll probably be next week before they touch down there. So they're playing obviously the Maori All Blacks in a couple of games, 5-game series, so we'll have more on that as we build up to it next week. Alan, you are back with us. You broke up mid-sentence. I was going to ask you there about some of the concerns you had about the URC, because you said there a moment ago you were just unsure about what you saw in the final at the weekend. So what's concerning you most about the future of this competition?
I just think it's I have said this many times, the Welsh team's not been competitive in it. And I'm not having a go off Welsh rugby, but I think that's a concern that, the Ospreys, Scarlets and Cardiff weren't, in the mix for the playoffs. I think it shows how strong the South Africans can be with 3 of them in the playoffs. And I just think obviously winning it, I think, we've complained for years that the league wasn't competitive enough, particularly in the latter stages. And I think that, a lot of the English journalists give out about probably the game management of Irish players and the amount of games they play when it comes to game management and stuff like that. I still think that's going to be the same going forward, particularly through the IRFU player management, player welfare process, that the way the Irish players are managed. That's not going to really change, but I think having Welsh teams being more competitive, but look, you have to tip your hat to the South African teams, and I think it's brilliant. It's up to the rest of the teams to try and be more competitive, deal with a different sort of game plan, physicality, travelling to South Africa, all that kind of stuff. But the Stormers were they lost the least amount of games in the league, so you can't really argue that they didn't deserve to be there. And obviously what the Bulls did to Leinster the week before proved that they're going to be a handful going forward. And I think the positive here for South African rugby is there's lots of young players have emerged in recent weeks, and some of them been picked in the Springbok squad. Evan Roos, Player of the Year in the URC, I think he was phenomenal. I watched him right at the start of the season, and I actually said to Ron O'Gara, you should try and sign this guy for La Rochelle, because he's a fantastic player, and they have a lot of good young players coming through. But I think the occasion and the scenes that we saw at the weekend were brilliant. I know some Irish people are saying we're not going to tune in and we're not going to watch, and maybe it didn't capture the attention here, but I thought it was a brilliant occasion. I think both sides probably kicked the ball way too much. The Stormers kicked the ball 46 times from hand, and the Bulls 41 times. So that was probably the frustrating part. Just the amount of times that they kicked, and it seemed to be contestable kicks continuously, kicking the ball away. And but Stormers were brilliant, and their attack game in the second half was much better than the Bulls. I know Jake White was upset and disappointed with his side's game management, but it was a great occasion and brilliant for South African rugby.
On Saturday morning then, Blues against Crusaders was on in the Super Rugby final. Crusaders won another title. The conditions weren't great, so we didn't see a fully slick version of Scott Robertson performing his dance at the full-time whistle, but some amazing offloads, some brilliant rugby played throughout the game. Just in particular, Quinny, I'm interested in the All Blacks that impressed you. Who should we be looking out for from a Blues and especially from a Crusaders perspective, given what you saw on Saturday morning?
I think Richie Mo'unga was outstanding again for the Crusaders. Just his overall attack game, and just the thought of probably Bowden Barrett and Richie Mo'unga being in a side that'll play Ireland on Saturday week is incredible. I think that again it was a game that was. It would cause you send ripples down your spine the way the Crusaders played in that first half. They were brilliant. The pace, the accuracy, the passing, the intensity that they brought, and that's something that Ireland are going to have to. I'm sure they'll be very, very aware of that. what's coming. I think there'll be an angry reaction from New Zealand when they play Ireland in that first test. But I thought Richie Mo'unga was incredible, and that's the challenge for Ian Foster. Does he play the two of them, or does he leave one out? Does he play Barrett at full back and Mo'unga at 10? Sam Whitelock looks like he may be out for the Irish Tour. He played with a broken thumb. But Rieko Ioane again for the Blues was brilliant at the weekend. Akira Ioane, I should say, the back row. They've so many options. I think there's going to be a lot of young players and some new guys come on the scene for the All Blacks, but it's kind of getting closer and closer. And just watching what the Crusaders did at the weekend, I think that caused a little bit of concern for what may happen in a couple of weeks and the challenge that's facing Ireland.
One other game I wanted to ask you about at the weekend, and I didn't expect to be talking about this, was the Barbarians game. They beat England 52-21. Will Skelton was sent off and they led by only 3 points. There was a backheel conversion scored. It was Barbarians being Barbarians. We don't tend to read into this, but there's a headline here from the Telegraph. England boss Jones calls for calm after Barbarian humiliation. People... Maybe it's just Twitter people or like maybe just England fans who are getting carried away with this, but it does feel that this is a talking point, England getting beaten by the Barbarians. Does that speak to a wider malaise around the tenure of Eddie Jones at the moment, or is this a non-event, a non-story in your view?
Yeah, it wasn't a good result for them. Obviously, they had the Premiership finals on Leicester and Saracens, so the vast amount of his starters were playing in that final. They go to Australia for 3 tests, but there was still a lot of seasoned internationals played in that English side. I was just looking through the side who would start for England and Australia. Well, Tom Curry and Sam Underhill in the back row. Johnny May was on the wing. Charlie Ewells was playing. But I think to lose by that much against the Barbarians at home, because I played in the Barbarians before, I know how, like, you're literally thrown together. There's no pressure. The week is a bit of a celebration. The training isn't too hard. And for Fabien Galtier to put the Barbarian side together, I know the vast majority of those players were French players, and I'm sure he'll take some of them on their tour to Japan as well. But that would be really concerning for me. That look, it won't mean anything if Eddie Jones can get his side together and go to Australia and win the series there. But it's more kind of negative press that he's going to get and more pressure given the last 2 Six Nations where they finished and the results that England have had. So not hugely significant, but still, I think if this was Ireland and they were in that situation, the press here would probably be really concerned and writing about that, and there'll be a lot more pressure on the Irish coaches. So he's deflecting a little bit and probably will get a pass here. But
I guess Quinny, he has the last cycle, World Cup cycle as well, where it felt as though England were in crisis and there were questions about his time in charge, probably at a similar moment away from the World Cup, and he still managed to get his team to perform, is what he can fall back on.
Yeah, probably. I think, and that's what saved him during in the Six Nations. There was a lot of pressure coming on, given some of the results, but they're not that. I think they're showing a lot of vulnerability. I think he's made a lot of changes and been chopping and changing his side for the last couple of seasons, Nathan. So I think he's will he go for the tried and tested in Australia, guys on reputation or form? I'm not sure, but I think if they were to go to Australia and lose a series, it just ramps up the pressure again. Will they make a decision and say, well, he won't go to the World Cup next year? I think it's probably too late in the day. I think he will go to the World Cup. And, if you put down an English side on paper and with everyone available, I think there'll still be a handful for anyone and be challengers for the World Cup. But there is a lot of pressure, and that negativity kind of stays with you until you start getting some really big results. So I think for their own confidence and self-belief, and for Eddie Jones to kind of dispel some of that negativity, he needs to do well in Australia with his team this summer.
Just one last thing we wanted to touch on, Alan, before we wrapped up this morning is, because we're in the off-season now, what Munster are going to do with these next few months. We've seen Leinster make a couple of acquisitions over the last little while, and they've built, it seems, ahead of next season. What do you expect Munster to do in this off-season, if anything?
Yeah, I'm not sure they're going to be able to sign. They've signed at the moment Malachi Fekitoa, Anton Frisch, and Chris Moore, a young hooker from Exeter. He played for the Ireland club side a number of years ago. He's an exciting prospect. We don't know much about him. I think the issues obviously they have is, and I don't want to be disrespectful to who's already in those positions in the front row area. There's not enough depth there. There's not enough strength in depth. And if you want to win trophies, and particularly in Europe as well, you need to try and find quality there. So there's a lot of talk of Ollie Jaeger played for the Crusaders at the tight head in the weekend, and there's continuous talk that maybe the Irish provinces will be looking to try and get him back. I don't think he's signed a new contract yet with the Crusaders. I think he was hoping to be in the All Black squad for the summer tour. He's someone that Munster, I'm sure, would be aware of. Maybe they've spoken to him. I don't know. That's only speculation, but the other side of that, what they need to do is get Kenyon Knox and Roman Salanoa up to speed, and hope that they make some more progress, dynamic progress to strengthen the front row areas, because they're two young players who we need to see more of. Scott Buckley is a very promising hooker. I think he needs to come through now and get more games as well, and really challenge the other hookers there. If you were trying to sign, I think it's the obvious area that they're under pressure in, and that they need more depth in, but props are hard to come by for everyone. I think if you get RG Snyman back, that'll be an incredible boost for him if he can stay fit, and they get a run of games from him throughout the season. They'll be pretty okay. Who knows what Malachi Fekitoa, will he bring the consistency that's required? He's a very, very talented player. Damien Dialende, his presence alone in that midfield was really important for Munster. But I think the coaching, that's what everybody's talking about. The attack game, can they develop their game more and play with pace and tempo that we've seen Leinster kind of set a standard for the last couple of seasons. So really, really important pre-season for them, and maybe they'll sign one or two players. I don't know yet.
Alan, good stuff this morning. Thanks a million for being with us.
Cheers, thanks lads.
Alan Quinlan there on the line. We'll have plenty more from Alan over the next little while as he makes the trip down to New Zealand. The first test, Saturday week at this point against the All Blacks. Right, it is 11 minutes past 9. You're with us here on OTB AM, which is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Here's what we've got on OTB Sports Radio over the course of the next few hours. OTB Gold is Brian O'Driscoll in conversation with Izan Asewa. Splonk Sport from 3 o'clock. Classic Game Club is Dublin against Kerry 2001 from 4 o'clock. And then 6 o'clock is OTB Gold. Michael Owen on Life After Football. Off the Ball live on your radio as ever with Joe and the gang from 7 o'clock. You can follow Off the Ball across all our social channels, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and download the OTB Sports app for the latest and best in sports content and analysis. We're going to be back after a quick break. Anthony Moyles was watching the Tailteann Cup semi-finals.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The Hurling Pod on OTB Sports.
Do they actually want to win the Leinster? I look at the way Kilkenny celebrated. I look at the way Limerick celebrated Munster, right? Do Galway actually want to win the Leinster? Or are they treating it as just another game, another stepping stone? That's a question I have.
Join myself, Will O'Callaghan, along with James Skehill and Paul Murphy for the best insight this hurling season. Subscribe to the GA podcast feed on the OTB Sports app now.
Marginal gains? XG? Top speed? Recovery? What's it all about? Want to improve but don't know where to start? With more data than ever now available, OTB Sports have teamed up with Whoop to cut through the noise and help you raise your game, no matter the sport. OTB Sports are delivering the metrics that matter. Meaningful metrics in partnership with Whoop, the personalised digital fitness and health coach that helps you unlock your inner potential. See whoop.com for more. Follow OTB Sports social channels for the best insights and stats this season.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
13 minutes past 9. You're very welcome back to OTB AM. Anthony Moyles has joined us in studio. Good morning, Anthony. Thanks for coming in.
No bother, gents.
So, Tailteann Cup semi-finals in Croke Park, on television, in a prime spot. Like, you can't not be entertained by that, right? This is everything we've been asking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think there was 16,500 people at it, much the same as last weekend. The games were excellent, I have to say. You know, the Cavan game was just end to end, flat out. You know, loads of entertainment, loads of great scores, loads of mistakes, loads of opportunities, loads of goals, loads of missed goals. I had a bit of everything. I'm delighted, you know, and I kind of look at the four teams and indeed the four managers. And I was reading a good piece on Mickey Graham over the weekend about how they kind of came together. And they said, right, you know, after the disappointment of the defeat to Donegal, they said, right, are we going to give this a lash? And they all decided as a panel they were. And you know, you can see it. You can see that they want to win it. And all four teams that were there were busting a gut to get the win. So, you know, it's just brilliant to get those teams back into Croke Park. It's brilliant to have the lads have an opportunity to continue their season and get some silverware at the end of it.
The first game was a cracker. It felt at the end, this was the one that got away for Sligo in particular. There were chances there in that second half for them to take this game. Yeah, there was. I don't think really. I always thought Cavan probably had enough. I think a little bit more experience. Rory Mcilroy, I thought was excellent for them and really, really good when they needed him at certain times, just to kind of get a score or influence the game. Win a kick out or whatever it was. There definitely were chances for Sligo. Like it kind of reminded me of the Sligo are starting to get that kind of swashbuckling style back again that they had when, you know, back in the day with O'Hara and guys like that, Davy and fellas like that, where they just would, when they go on a roll, they can really hurt you, and especially up front. They've got some really good forwards. They could have had 4 or 5 goals. You know, I felt really sorry for them, but to be fair, there was some unbelievable last-ditch defending by Cavan, like fellas who didn't give it up, you know, went back and, you know, as from a defensive point of view, you're looking at it and saying that was really, really excellent. You know, they got their hands in, they got flicks away, they got blocks, and as I say, they never gave it up, which showed the intensity and the desire of both teams to go ahead and win that game. Yeah, Sligo could be unlucky, but I just thought Cavan just had enough to pip them in the end, even if they had got a few goals.
Games like that feel really important as well for the success of the competition from other counties looking on, and whatever about the crowd was, you know, a decent crowd, and they worked it well that they were all in the same stand and it seemed to build a bit of an atmosphere. But too often when we see players from these counties, it's almost in a negative light. They're playing very defensive football against a Division 1 side. They can't express themselves in any way. Like, you come away from watching that first game yesterday between Cavan and Sligo, like, these are some of the best footballers in the country. Like, they are exactly what they should be shown to be. They were able to show off their skill set. We don't see enough of that. Yeah, it's amazing. It's like the Shackles. Like, honestly, you know, I had to watch back the game because I was on Father's Day duties yesterday. I was in the middle of Jurassic World yesterday. Father's the other way around. You get to do what you want on Father's Day.
I know. Well, not quite. But anyway, I was in and out getting more and more popcorn. Every 5 minutes, can we get more popcorn? Can we get more? So that's after your last Croke Park experience, I think maybe you made the decision. Yeah, I think I did. Yeah, you got a popcorn problem in your house. Yeah, I did. I did throw the opportunity. I threw up the chance of going into Croke Park, but it was like, not that place again. So I'll just let it fester in their mind. They might forget about it in a year's time. But no, it's like I didn't expect to see what I because I stayed away from the results, so I just wanted to watch it fresh. And literally from minute one, it was absolutely brilliant. And as you say, Nathan, there is a kind of an idea. I was laughing with Colin outside. I was saying Cavan, you know, poor old Cavan, they don't deserve to be in Ulster because they play quite expansive and go at you type football. And Mickey Graham, like, he's playing the type of football. There's loads of mistakes. It kind of reminds me, and I'm not just saying this, but, you know, like, when you were playing kind of in the mid-2000s, there's a lot of kicking, you know, and there's a lot of, and if it goes right, it looks really brilliant, but then sometimes it goes wrong, the defender comes out in front, but there's lads taking chances and taking risk all the time, and they're trying to move the ball as fast and as quickly and as progressively as possible, either by hand, but mostly by foot. Fellas in the forward line who are willing to take on their men, they're not looking to recycle the ball, you know, they're willing to have a go, and yes, they get dispossessed, or they get blocked down, or they kick shots short, But it was absolutely, like, it was. I have to say, it was refreshing to see. You know, it really was refreshing.
But that's what that should be. Like, if you were to compare it with soccer and the difference between the Premier League and the Championship, like they would always say in the Championship, they're helter-skelter games. You can afford to give the ball away because they'll give the ball back to you again. Whereas when you go up a level, if you give it away, like if a Westmeath or a Cavan go up against, if they go up against Tyrone, they're not getting that ball back. But actually at this level, at their level, you can afford to do that because you will get it back.
Yeah, and it's funny, and I think none of the 4 teams went out with that kind of. There was men behind the ball. You know, don't get me wrong. There was men behind the ball, but none of them got the ball and then dropped the level down, as in, okay, we'll just slowly build this. Everyone just went, as I say, hell for leather. Like Spillane was just the engine on that lad, up and down the pitch. His driving runs was unbelievable yesterday, and he dragged Sligo back into that game after they had a bit of a tricky start. Like they missed 4, 5, 6 chances handy in the first 10 or 15 minutes, you know, bad shot selection. It was kind of like nearly that they had to get their eye into Croke Park. But then, look, it's. I think what has to happen is a lot of these teams, when they go in against the bigger teams, have to cut their cloth to measure against them. So what they do is they end up setting up defensively, right? So they set up in a way that they either are in the game for the last 10 or 15 minutes, or that they don't get an absolute tank. And now you're never going to go into the game with that mentality, but you're going to go in and you're saying to the team, look, we're going to go in here 10 minutes remaining that we're still in the game. So by virtue of doing that, they set up defensively, they train defensively, and then they look to counter. But yesterday they're going, okay, we're going in against a team who are on our level. So we're not going to do that. We're actually going to be, as you say, show who we are, show our ability, and go at them. And try to do all the things that we can do. Now, the argument is should they do that anyway against the bigger teams? You know, and just say, you know, feck it, we're trying to develop our game.
We come on here on a Monday morning, we all say they're naive and...
Yeah, you probably would, and you like, you know. But there's been teams. You look at, say, Westmeath and Offaly. You know, teams have been getting hiding from Dublin for the last 10, 12 years. So really, does it make a difference? You know, so when you go into those games, I just don't know. I think there's this big question of. And it probably comes on management teams via county boards or supporters, which is where is a team's, what is the team's journey? What's their identity? What's a success look like for that team? And what the Tailteann Cup has afforded these teams is that is success. That, you know, if they progress and they win that, it is success. So people can, you know, who are bemoaning this at the start of the year, it's an LB competition. It doesn't make a difference. It shows progress. Because if you go and you get hammered out the gate in Connacht or in Leinster or in Ulster, whatever it is, by a far superior team, by playing a defensive setup, which is not really your natural setup, well, then you've learned nothing. And you haven't progressed during the year. You know, all the stuff you've been doing and training is getting ready for this game to say we're going to shut up shop. But you're actually looking, going, you know what, those lads are actually good players. I wish we could actually play a bit more of an expansive game for them. But I have this game coming up, and if I do that, the supporters or the media or whoever, the county board, will absolutely kill me for it. So fellas go for, well, let's protect. And they go for, as I say, maybe the less risky opportunity or the less risky way of playing. Whereas, you know what, I think you look at the management teams that are involved, you look at the fellas at what they're trying to do. They obviously have support from their county boards, and I would hope, and I feel, and I even see it. It's funny. I was driving in, I could even see some Cavan flags on the way in. So Cavan people in Dublin like supporting the Cavan team, but. You know, it's important that they have a journey, that they have, as I say, what is success, and they try to get these key measures that they can tick off as they go. And what the Tailteann Cup for me has provided outside of the league is another competition where they can say this is progress.
You say that if a team sets up in such a way, they'll get slammed on a Monday morning here if they do it. We're awfully naive, and should we be slamming them this morning for the way they approached the Westmeath game yesterday afternoon?
We won't slam them. I think awfully where there was, like, look, they lost their captain during the week with a cruciate ligament injury, I believe, and then they had a virus in the camp which was going around, and they looked in that first half that they were just completely devoid of energy. You know, they were falling off tackles, the energy up and down the pitch. You know, for a number of the players, not all of them, but for a number of the players, 4 or 5 of the players was just lacking. I don't think Westmeath were doing anything unbelievably brilliant. but I just think Offaly were pretty awful in that first half. Now, the start of the second half, when they really went at them and they decided, actually, do you know what, we're going to go into a game here. They got themselves a bit better defensively set up, because in the first half they were so wide open down the middle, it was unbelievable. And nearly Westmeath ended up with one extra player in their forward line, which I was kind of going, how can Offaly actually be affording this? It was just too easy for Westmeath in the first half. Second half they got themselves a bit more together, and they showed what they can do, because again, you're looking at progress, and Offaly, there is some serious talent in that Offaly team. Very, very young, serious talent. Forwards who can take on shots. Like, one of the best goals you've seen probably in the championship this year was scored by the young lad who came on. I can't remember his name now, but the outside of his right boot, bang, top corner, absolute screamer near the end of the game. Fantastic finish and a fantastic goal, because he sets it up, he goes for the 1-2, great determination, and puts it in the back of the net. But you know, if I'm Offaly again, and if you're Michael Duignan, and if you're all the people in Offaly, you're saying to yourself, you know what, okay, we bowed out against Westmeath, we showed good fight. Maybe the measure of the result was probably a little bit more favourable to Westmeath. A bit naive at the back. If we can tighten it up at the back, if we can get a bit more of a defensive structure, we have the forwards to probably really build on and punish teams over the next number of years. So, you know, it's, again, I just go back to it, that those lads, they would have been gone, you know, and they'd be back with their club, and, you know, whereas they're staying there and they can get those extra 6 or 8 weeks with a management team, and they can keep building and keep trying to get things right, and bring in new fellas. And then all of a sudden you can see fellas, even, you know, when you're 10 or 12 points behind and you have a player who just throws up the white flag and says, oh, listen, I'm done, or gives a black card or gets a red card or something like that, you know to yourself, this guy isn't really made of it. But if you see fellas digging in, you're putting marks beside them for the following year, saying, you know what, these guys have done it in that situation and they nearly brought us back. So as a management team, you learn an awful lot. But no, Offaly will be disappointed, of course, but I think there was some mitigating factors as well in their preparation that didn't help them.
Cathal Flynn, by the way, the fellow who scored that incredible goal for Offaly yesterday. So the Tailteann Cup final is going to be a 3 o'clock throw-in on the 9th of July. That'll be a curtain raiser for the semi-final on the Galway Armagh Derry Clare side of the draw. You obviously had a double header yesterday in a prime spot, nothing else going up against it. The GAA have clearly made an effort of putting the spotlight on this thing, or at least allowing it to flourish. What would you change for next season, or have they got this thing right in season 1, do you think?
I think the Tailteann Cup final should be on the same day as the All-Ireland final.
You do, yeah?
Yeah. I think it should be, absolutely, and I think, why not? You know, I think you've got in there, you know, like, look, I think there's probably things that you could tweak, and there's certain ways, and, you know, you'd probably have to talk to the players and say, listen, how did you guys handle it? How did you find it? You talk to the managements involved, and you get just an understanding of what works best. There's plenty of time in the calendar, as you know. So,
can I just ask, is it like I don't know, is this an elitist mindset? Like, would you put the Europa League final on the same ticket as the Champions League final? Like, I mean, the European rugby setup, I think anyway, have a good setup where they have the Challenge Cup final on the Friday, the Heineken Cup final on the Sunday or the Saturday. Like, you could do a Saturday-Sunday setup potentially.
You could do a Saturday-Sunday.
Maybe not. Maybe you do put them on the same ticket, and, you know, forget the extra 30,000 tickets that won't go to the two Sam Maguire, or for the Tailteann Cup counties as well. The sharing of the tickets and all that.
There is the share. Yeah, so look, you know, people will jump up and down and say, listen, it's hard enough to get All Ireland final tickets, so, you know, now you're going to make it really impossible. Absolutely. You would probably have the argument that the minor sometimes was on, obviously, in the past, so that might draw from the senior anyway.
Yeah, fair.
You know, so until I think maybe initially, like, I mean, from what I can see, and even seeing the papers and the press, and, you know, I think, you know, initially there was all this kind of giving out about the Tailteann Cup, and it was like there's no such thing as bad publicity. It was the best thing for it because people were talking about it. Now I think people have actually looked, and if people really sat down and watched those games yesterday, or even went into it, they'd see 4 teams going at it, who you could quite clearly see wanted to win their games, right? They weren't just throwing out the jerseys and saying, Jesus, this is a post-season campaign here, and it's a bit of a disaster. We don't really want to be involved here. I think the final will be a cracking final, and it will be full of quality, and it could be better than the All-Ireland final, as a spectacle. So, you might go into that day and go, Jesus, I wish this was on the Sunday if it was on the Saturday. It's hard to know. Nathan's point about, the fact that the fear is gone. You can see there was no fear in those teams yesterday. There was no fear of being beaten. There was no fear of not getting their tactics right. There was no fear of being lambasted. There was a kind of like, this is a free shot. And they went out and they played with abandon. They just went at it. And that's fantastic to see. And you kind of go, Jesus, why don't more teams do this?
Yeah.
Whether it's in the provincial championships or whatever it is later in the day. Like, of course you have to tip your hat to a team and have strategies and tactics and all that stuff. But for me, I think it's the only way to go at football or to go at sport.
Yeah, well, I think next year, if the round robin comes in, which I think it's expected to for the Tailteann Cup, again, that makes a massive difference because as a manager, you can sit down and almost plan out your year and say, well, regardless of what happens in Leinster or Munster, we know we're going to be playing 3 more games, so book yourselves in, lads, right till the end of May.
Yes.
And suddenly you've got your 6-7 league games. You've got 10, 11 matches throughout a year, all of which are important.
Yeah.
And that's what the players want. That's what the manager want. And generally all against teams at your own level. And it'll be fascinating to see how this builds into next year because Westmeath finished 3rd in Division 3, so they are they should be the best team in this Tailteann Cup. If they go and win this, you're guaranteed a spot in Sam Maguire next year, regardless of what happens in the league. But do they now kick on? Do they take confidence into Division 3 next year and say, we are the best of the rest, and we can build and actually start to close the gap on Dublin, or maybe even beat Meath or Kildare in the Leinster Championship? That's what you want from this.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100% is what you want. And as I say, it's also, I think it is about finding... when you have the behemoth, which is Dublin, and we've spoken about this in the last number of months, when you have them in Leinster, what happens is, and I know I heard the interview with Andy with you guys last week maybe. When you're talking about what is your focus every year, and no matter whether you're Kildare, Westmeath, Meath, whoever you are in Leinster, is it to win Leinster? Is that your ambition every year? Because if I went in, I'm just saying, let's say, slagging earlier on, say you go in for the Meath job and someone says, well, what's your ambition this year? I'm not saying to win Leinster. Because if you win Leinster, you're winning the All-Ireland. So is it, are you going in and say, oh, I want to win the All-Ireland? So you're saying, actually, no, our focus this year is, without being the usual, to be as competitive, but actually to show what is success for us, right? So our league basis has to be success. So you're in the top 2 or top 3 in the league. That's what you're really pushing for. Or even top 4 in Division 2, which is where you are, or whatever it is. If it's Westmeath, Cooney's sitting down now, he's saying, right, lads, we need to build on this. We need to get out of Division 3, and we're pushing to get into Division 2. We're looking for a good run. But then if...
I think quarter-final.
All those different things. But, but the Tailteann Cup then affords you, as you rightly say, Nathan, it lets you map out as a management team and as a squad, right, this is where we're going and this is where we need to focus. We have this, and this is what we want to achieve by the end of it. And then at the end of it, we'll decide whether we had a successful year or not, based on whatever happened during the year. But at least it gives you, it's not an all or nothing thing, bang, and the next thing we're into the qualifiers, and sure, who knows? We could meet someone massive, or we could meet someone and we go on a bit of a run, or not. There's a pathway, if you get me, and it's something
the
that's
more
very,
interesting
very
pathway would be if the winner of the Tailteann Cup, if there was a way of fixing the calendar, which doesn't seem available now, if the winner of the Tailteann Cup got into an All-Ireland quarter-final at the end of
the same year,
and suddenly you have this wave of momentum, and Westmeath are going in, and you're looking at a draw, potentially a favourable draw against one of the qualifiers, whatever way. I don't know if there's any way of figuring that out.
I think that would be a fantastic idea.
Because then it's in the same. Because the one issue for Westmeath or Cavan now is they won't play a game again after this for 7 months. So while we're talking about momentum, that's a hard thing to keep through.
Or maybe winter. You know what? Whoever gets into the final. To be some hell of a difference of motivation for teams in the Tailteann Cup then. That they find their way back in, as you say, back into the latter stages of the qualifiers. Maybe not I don't know what way you would do it, but
who's going to win that final?
I was impressed with Cavan yesterday. I really was. But again, when they looked to be massively in control of the game, Sligo could have had 5 goals. Westmeath were very, very efficient. I think obviously in Heslin they have a player who is in imperious form. He's just, doing everything he needs to do up there, and he'll take massive watching. I wouldn't be surprised if Cavan just put 2 players on him and then see how the rest work out. But they've a nice little forward line, Westmeath. They've got a little bit of danger everywhere, decent midfield, strong at the back. It's going to be a very, very tight game. That very, very tight game. I can't call it. I think it's going to be massively, massively close.
It is then this weekend, All-Ireland football quarter-finals weekend. Can I get one word for each of the games? So
yeah, go for it.
Let's go Derry-Clare first.
Derry.
Dublin-Cork.
Dublin.
Galway-Armagh.
Armagh.
That's the big one. Kerry-Mayo.
Kerry.
Sure about that?
I am, but I tell you this much. The more it goes and the closer it gets.
I know.
What's the story with Clifford, if you don't mind? Or are you not allowed? I'm sure the Yarra, I'd say they're pressing the red button at the moment.
They might rest him again this weekend, won't they, for the Dublin game?
I think it was like, I think it was maybe like 90 minutes between the text last week being like, Clifford's out and Clifford's flying in training and good to go.
Yeah, so. Exactly, yeah.
I don't know. Nobody knows.
It's funny, the more I think about it, and maybe it's just one of these things where you talk yourself into it, but I think Mayo are perfectly suited for Kerry. In the sense that, as we know, the Kerry defence has really improved this year. The Mayo forward line isn't fantastic this year, but Mayo's main strength comes from 2, 3, 4, 5 and 7, bombing up the pitch. And that will not be liked by the Kerry full forward line. They will not want to. Stephen O'Brien will do you. He'll do your donkey work up and down, no bother. As will, who's usually on the other side.
The Adrian Spillane
or one of the. But will David, if they manage to take off the cotton wool, and will Gainey, will the rest of the lads, will they fancy chasing the boys, Keegan, O'Hara, and the rest of the lads up and down Croke Park?
They don't like running. They don't like it up in Kerry.
Oh, well, listen, the arrogance they're thinking about Dublin in the semi-final. They have the hotel rooms booked in Dublin for the weekend of the semi-final against Dublin.
You'd want to have them booked, to be fair.
That's fair enough, but I'm just saying, you've got the arrogance of Kerry on one side and the humbleness of Mayo people on the other. And
I believe they'll probably just book the hotels right through. They'll probably just say, listen, we'll just keep going all the way through to the end. So we'll be here again.
Yeah, it's true.
Get a discount.
Yeah, I'm sure you could always just a few of us could get together, put up a few couches for the poor Kerry players when they get to the All-Ireland semi-finals, if they comes to that. Thank you for bringing your humility to proceedings this morning, Nathan.
Would you say this Kerry team is already better than the Dub 6 in a row winning side?
Just about level par, I'd say. Okay. Just one might have a nose in front. Anthony, thanks for popping in this morning. Enjoy this weekend. OTB are already talking about the weekend on a Monday morning. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We're back tomorrow morning from 7:30 as ever. Dan MacDonald of the Irish Independent will be with us in studio for the morning. So we'll have Andy Mitten talking Manchester United. Vinnie Perth will be talking about some of the Republic of Ireland players and their transfer business this summer. We'll have Deal or No Deal back as well, and plenty more besides. Right now we're leaving you with yesterday's Sunday paper review. We'll chat to you tomorrow morning at 7:30. Bye-bye.
And 2 points. So Cian, Tracy, you're going off to New Zealand. What is the best rugby writing of a Sunday?
There's a couple of kind of look back pieces from Peter O'Reilly in the Sunday Times, Brendan Fanning kind of doing similar in the Sunday Independent. Bernard Jackman's column is always worth a read. I think he's been a great addition to the Sunday Indo, kind of, a bit of an analytical view. And John, you kind of talked about a bit of colour, there's always a bit of colour in Bernard Jackman's piece. And Neil Francis is also writing in the Sunday Times about sort of Leinster and Ireland's set piece woes, really, which I think is definitely worth talking about as well. But Peter O'Reilly's piece kind of, I suppose, sets it up well before the tour. I mean, it's kind of, we're in that kind of strange phase now where the URC final was yesterday, and it kind of went under a lot of people's radar, I guess, because it was an all South African final. And I watched it was decent enough, but it was a strange day actually, because not a strange day. It was a great day of rugby on paper, because you kind of started at 8:30 yesterday morning with the Super Rugby final between the Crusaders and the Blues, which, I was writing about this on Saturday, that it was a real kind of taster of what's to come for Ireland. I think in New Zealand you had the two best New Zealand teams. I think it was 20 or 21 All Blacks on show. The weather was horrific in Auckland, which is where the first stop of Ireland's, the first test is going to be on Saturday 2 weeks, or Saturday week now at this stage. So yeah, it was interesting. And Neil Francis is writing about this, about kind of Ireland's, Leinster's line out struggles, but any problem that Leinster have, Ireland have the same problem for obvious reasons, because Leinster are going to be the bulk suppliers to the team, you'd imagine. Again, Neil Francis is writing about how the Bulls basically picked off Leinster's line-out last weekend in the semi-final, and it is a big concern, because obviously Ireland are going to be without now Ronan Kelleher, who's first choice hooker, and Dan Sheehan is definitely an able replacement, but I think you're going to miss having that 1-2 punch with, you know, Kelleher starting and Dan Sheehan coming off the bench. And yeah, like, I think there's big issues over Ireland's scrum, because, you know, Leinster's scrum has been kind of picked apart a couple of times over the last few weeks as well, particularly in Europe. They conceded a lot of penalties in their quarter-final against Leinster and against Leicester, and in the semi-final against Toulouse. So there's no doubt teams are looking at it as a chance to get at Leinster and Ireland. And the line-out is something interesting as well, because one of the big takeaways I had from the Super Rugby final yesterday was Sam Whitelock, who was back for the Crusaders and did a number on the Blues line-out, like just an incredible performance. But it was a real kind of warning for Ireland in terms of what to expect. Like, this guy's one of the best locks in the world, and like I said, just picked off the Blues line-out, and it just stranglehold them, didn't give them any foothold in the game, and Crusaders ultimately ran out winners. But Neil Francis is kind of writing about I suppose the art of calling, and you know, he was obviously a line-out caller back in the day, but he's talking about a hooker, and he says sometimes at this level a hooker gets bamboozled if he can't pick his space in the line-out. If it was easy when there was only one person jumping up for it, it is like when you were teeing off and there is a river to your left. You try not to look at the water, but you know you are going to hook the ball into the drink. No river there, and you will drive the ball straight. Even if the hooker gets the ball to where it is supposed to go, if you are going to challenge it, there's a good chance that you can pick it off. That mentality should be that every opposition throw should be considered your own ball. And it's a good little insight into, you know, it's a good analogy. We've spent so much time talking about the golf and, you know, standing on the first tee, or any tee for that matter, what the nerves must be like. But you can imagine a hooker kind of looking down the line of a line out, and it's such a narrow target to hit. And yeah, I think it's an issue that, like, Ireland are going to have to work on. And, you know, Neil Francis is touching on kind of Leinster's, you know, you'd have to say disappointing end to the season. They must analyse why they ended up spending large portions of most of these big matches defending their line. It almost seems like Leinster chose to defend their way to victory, and they've come up short too many times when it matters most. There will have to be small changes in their thinking on their weaknesses, and some personnel will have to be ruthlessly dispatched in the off-season, or these near misses will continue. So I think a few weeks ago, before, you know, the season kind of came to a shuddering halt, you'd have to say, for the Irish Promises, I was definitely quite optimistic about Ireland's chances going down to New Zealand. I mean, you touched on it earlier, JD, they've never won down there. The All Blacks are definitely vulnerable. On home soil, it's very different, but there's pressure on them. There's still a couple of positions that they're trying to figure out. They don't have this locked and loaded team that they had when they were winning World Cups. And so there's definitely sort of areas that Ireland can get out there, but there's no doubt that the way the kind of, you know, Munster season petered out really disappointingly. Connacht had a really tough year all round. Ulster, disappointing semi-final defeat, and Leinster obviously beaten in a semi-final and final. So your optimism is kind of tempered a little bit, which is probably no harm, to be fair. You know, I don't think anyone is expecting Ireland to go down there realistically to win a series. I think that would be, if they were to do that, that would be incredible. And kind of Bernard Jackman is writing about this in the Sunday Independent. And, you know, the power issue has come up again, and it's never going to go away. I mean, because, like, Ireland just don't produce the power athletes that your South Africa, your France and your England have. But an interesting point here that Bernard Jackman makes is, this may surprise many, but the All Blacks aren't one of the most powerful teams in world rugby. And while they present a formidable challenge, even if Ireland beat them, it will do nothing to quell the doubts around our ability to beat teams that physically look to strangle us. I don't know if I would fully agree with that. I know the point he's making, that they're not quite, you know, Eben Etzebeth and Franco Mostard in the second row, these big giant, you know, locks and props up front. I know the point he's getting, but I think if Ireland were to go down and beat New Zealand on home soil, even in one test, I think that would be enormous for the psyche of Irish rugby. You know, we're going into a World Cup next year, and we already know the route that they have in terms of the pool, playing South Africa and Scotland. And if they were to get out of the pool, which you expect that they will, they're going to be playing France or New Zealand in the quarter final. So really, it's the toughest World Cup draw you could ever have. But I think a tour in New Zealand is the ideal preparation, and particularly with the 2 extra games against the Maori All Blacks. Like I said, those games are no gimmies whatsoever. You just have to look through the quality of players that they've picked. Like TJ Perinara is very unlucky not to be in the All Black squad, and he's going to be in the Maori squad. So you're going to have guys who are trying to put their hand up to say to Ian Foster, the All Blacks head coach, you got this wrong. So it'll be very interesting to see how Andy Farrell uses those games. So you've got the first one on Wednesday week, which is a few days before the first test. So you'd imagine, like a lot of guys that, you know, are in the squad need games. Like you look at someone like Bundyaki, hasn't played in weeks because Connacht, and he actually missed the end of Connacht season. So it'll be interesting to see how he juggles it. He's picked a 40-man squad. There's so much potential in it, but I think there's a couple of areas that they need to get right as well, like I mentioned around the set piece in particular.
Yeah, I'm fascinated from your point of view, just as someone who's kind of expertly watching this. So if you, in this comparison, so again, we're 1 year out from the World Cup, and I suppose obviously the 2018 was landmark for so many years for what was, as you're kind of saying now, I suppose still, like if you're saying if they go down there and if they were to even win one of those tests against the All Blacks, that it would be a huge achievement. I'm kind of wondering what stage they're at from your point of view compared. So from 18, it felt like everything was going to be perfect right into 19. Is there? I know, and as we were saying earlier about narratives like that, it's kind of you'll only know afterwards. But what's the best case scenario?
Well, like 2018 will always be referencing, particularly in World Cup cycles. But for me, Ireland's biggest issue was they didn't evolve in 2019. Teams figured out how to play them. And I think the last few weeks, you know, I don't think Andy Farrell or his coaching staff believed that this Ireland team have come anywhere near their peak. Like, they didn't win a Six Nations, they didn't win the Grand Slam like Ireland did in 2018. But I think the last few weeks, in terms of the flaws that have been showing up in Leinster's game plan, because I was certainly someone who believes that Leinster had actually figured out a way to get around these bigger teams. I mean, when you think about the semi-final defeat to La Rochelle last year, everything that they had done since then was built around in terms of evolving the game plan. How are we going to beat a team like La Rochelle? So to have actually played La Rochelle and come up short again, I personally think that it was really damaging, and I think we saw evidence of that in the Bulls game. I'm not saying it was the same like for like, but I mean, you talk about the hang up, and we go back to the very start of this conversation, we spoke about the mental side of things. So I think this particular Ireland team has still got quite a bit of a journey to go on. I think even if they were to win a test down in New Zealand, I don't think there'd be no DVDs being released about it, like, you know, maybe like there would have been back in the day. But I think there is potential there, but I think the flaws that have been shown up have shown that they've actually got a good bit of road left to run. I mean, the out half position is always going to be up for debate. I think there's huge issues in terms of the front row depth, particularly at prop. I mean, even at lock, there's a bit of an issue there. So there are. It's not a bad place to be in at all, and this is like the ultimate test going down to New Zealand. Andy Farrell came out with a brilliant quote actually during the week where he basically said, like, this is proper test match international rugby. It's not like walking down, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's not like, you know, walking down Ball's Bridge and someone rolls down the window and tells you, oh, you're brilliant at rugby. Doing that, like, that's not going to happen in Dunedin, Auckland, you know. So that mental image is just brilliant, because we hear, and that's what I'm so looking forward to, like, we hear about how obsessed the Kiwis are, and you know, the hostile kind of reception. And Brennan Fanning is writing about this in the Sunday Independent as well, that on one of the tours that they went on back in the day, there was no one even there to greet the Ireland team. I mean, when they arrived in New Zealand. Now, I think it's a little bit different nowadays, obviously, like, relations are much better, but I think the respect has really changed. Like, it was a cliche for years when I was first covering the Ireland team, when the All Blacks were in town in November, that, you know, the only player that they could name or they cared about was Sean O'Brien, like, because they had ultimate respect for him, and then everyone else was just kind of, you know, a byproduct of it. And it was interesting. I marked it here. Gary Longwell in Peter O'Reilly's kind of look back piece, he's thinking back to 2002. This kind of really resonated with me about the Sean O'Brien point, because this is a comment here. If you read the local newspapers, it seemed as if Ireland consisted of O'Driscoll, Brian O'Driscoll, Keith Wood and 13 fillers in. And for years that's what it was like as well with Sean O'Brien, that, you know, they didn't really care about anyone else. But I think the respect has changed now, and the Ireland team are flying out in a couple of different batches. I think it just wasn't possible to get everyone on the same plane, so the first tranche left today. I think more are going to leave tomorrow, and there's a group of 70 altogether when you include the backroom staff as well. Like, that's an enormous undertaking. I think it's the biggest tour, I'm right in saying, that Ireland have ever undertaken, right? So when you include the 2 extra games and the 70 people, so I think there's going to be welcomes there like there wasn't. There could be a couple of hackas waiting for them when everyone arrives, unlike like Brendan Fanning says, when there was no welcome for them at all.
Yeah, the welcome, Brendan Fanning. All black Gary Weston, star second row for Auckland that day in Eden Park, at a different take on proceedings. Psychologically, they must be feeling down, he said after the 62-7 exhibition. To be honest, I'm a little disappointed in the Irish team. There's no doubt about that. I thought they would have put up a bit more of a challenge, if you like. And then wrapped up in all of this was another humdinger where the tourists were hammered to the tune of 58 points by Manawatu, where one Joe Schmidt had yet to make his breakthrough. Their captain Stu Bundy Cruden, Aaron's old man, dipped into the Gary Wetton post-match playbook, expressed disappointment in the best Ireland had to offer, a nuggety, sinewy, hard-arse flanker. Cruden looked thoroughly pissed off at being shortchanged in the warm-up ahead of his team playing Samoa the next week, which is kind of funny stuff in the Sunday Independent today. 18 points to 15. Cavan 18 points. Sligo 112. 68 minutes into the Tailteann Cup semi-final. The Joe Schmidt conundrum, if that's it's not probably the correct word, but the aura of Schmidt is returning to rugby, and now it's in New Zealand. He's been doing stuff with the Auckland Blues. He's now, I think, a consultant in Foster. Is there a chance we might see Joe Schmidt as an All Blacks coach before long?
I would say there's a massive possibility there is, yeah. It's interesting, like, I mean, he said he was retiring from coaching, but I don't think anyone really believes that, because he's such an obsessive about the game, and you look at like the amount of success that he's had, and sometimes when, like, and I'm very conscious of this every time I speak about the Joe Schmidt Ireland era, you can become kind of too focused on what happened in 2019 in that really disappointing year and forget about all the good stuff that came before it, like, because it was just great. Like, it was like a pinnacle of Irish rugby, like that 2018 year. Now, we just spoke about it there. They peaked too early, but you're seeing a lot of, like, I've been watching a good bit of Super Rugby this year, and, you know, Joe Schmidt has been working with the Blues, and you're seeing a lot of kind of the same traits that you saw in the Ireland team. I mean, Joe Schmidt, I don't think there's anyone in world rugby really as renowned for him as, you know, creating like set piece moves. And I think he's actually been working a lot on the Blues defence and their kind of off-field stuff, like creating that culture. Now, a lot of Ireland players would have said that became kind of smothering in the end, but for a while it was working and it was great. And yeah, so he's a consultant to Ian Foster, but if you're to read the small print, JD, he doesn't start until after the Ireland tour with the All Blacks. Now, I would love to be a fly on the wall and kind of see what's going on behind the scenes, because I would find it very hard to believe that if Ian Foster is getting Joe Schmidt as part of his backroom team, and he is under pressure, like I said, make no mistake about it, he is under pressure from the Kiwis a year out from the World Cup. I find it hard to believe that he's not going to tap into Joe Schmidt's knowledge of Ireland, and it just adds another fascinating layer of intrigue, I think, to the tour that's ahead. And, you know, if Ireland were to, you know, win a series, as probably unlikely as it may seem, I would struggle to see how Ian Foster would stay in his job, given, and like, rugby doesn't have this like kind of fire and hire culture that football has, and I'm not suggesting that in any way, but the Kiwi public will not stand for that.
Well, they're a bit like Kerry football, aren't they? You know, they expect there's victory and nothing else. That's why I always found it fascinating that Graham Henry, they kept Graham Henry after 2007, and they gave him another shot, and then he won the World Cup in 2011 at home. They're into 6 minutes of stoppage time at Croke Park. Cavan 18 points, Sligo 112 at the Tailteann Cup semi-finals, so Cavan have the edge there. Scott Robertson, I think, is very popular. He was doing the breakdancing again, wasn't he, after in the rain, so he'd be another popular candidate for a New Zealand head coach job if Ian Foster did fall on his sword.
He absolutely would be, but I think the reason that Joe Schmidt might be kind of even have edged ahead of him, despite the fact that the All Blacks generally want you to have been, you know, involved in the system before you kind of take on the All Blacks job, which, coming into the Blues, to me, was a stepping stone to that, and now taking on a consultancy role with Ian Foster's background, to me, is another stepping stone for that. And I think Joe Schmidt is going to be a, you know, break glass in case of emergency, that if it all goes wrong for the All Blacks, that Joe Schmidt will have been in there and he'll be in place. He's done his time, albeit only one season, as in the season just gone, but he's previously worked with the Blues before. He knows the workings of New Zealand rugby. So I would say, even though I think the longer term, I think Scott Robertson is definitely going to be an All Blacks coach. I mean, the amount of European clubs that were in for him, but he's wanted to stay in New Zealand, won the Super Rugby title again with the Crusaders yesterday. But Joe Schmidt will actually be in the All Black setup, and I think there's more of a chance of Joe Schmidt, if again it went wrong, of Joe Schmidt coaching the All Blacks at the World Cup rather than Scott Robertson, purely for that reason, because he seems to be taking the steps into the setup, and it'd be fascinating, wouldn't it? It's just a pity that he's not more kind of hands-on now, particularly from my point of view, because going over, you'd love to be able to get to chat to him, and at a press conference and things like that, and I see a friendly face. I don't know if he'd say the same about me or anyone else going over, but it would be good to see him.
Yeah, Ireland against New Zealand, the World Cup quarter-final next year. Andy Farrell and Joe Schmidt. That'd be some. You'd fill a week of newspaper print with that, wouldn't you? 19 points for Cavan, 112 for Sligo. 72 minutes into the Charlton Cup semi-final. The 6 minutes of stoppage time to be played. Just to finish the rugby, even the first paragraph of Peter O'Reilly's article, situated near the bottom of New Zealand's South Island, Dunedin in June is cold and wet and feels like the edge of the world. Look out across the enormity of the Southern Ocean and its next stop, Antarctica. I want to go there.
Yeah, well, I'm reading that going because the one
may never see you again. You'll end up in Dunedin and you'll get lost in the mist.
The one thing that the kind of a lot of my fellow journalists who are going, who've been there kind of several times for Lions tours and things like that, are saying it's very hard to get your head around going into the depths of winter from now. Albeit the weather isn't great here in Dublin at the moment either, but it's very hard to get your head around it. But when I was watching the Super Rugby final yesterday, I was going, God, I can see. I know what they mean. It was absolutely bucketing down. It's cold. It's wet. It's dark. Gets dark early, but I just can't wait to see what it entails.
I can't wait. I'm going on my walk on Balls Bridge this evening and somebody winding down the car window and go, Duggan, you're great. Yeah. What? I don't know. Kieran Dyer, just for anybody watching on the digital and social channels, just the I'm going to bring it over here. Yeah, I've got it over here. Yeah, just the article in the Daily Mail by Oliver Holt. My greatest hope is that whoever's liver I get, I do that person proud. I would be precious to get a second chance at life. England striker, or former star rather, Kieran Dyer, is staying positive in his battle with serious disease. So Dyer's 43 years old. 20 years ago this week he's playing for England in a World Cup quarter-final against Brazil, but last year he was told a rare condition he suffers from, primary sclerosing cholangitis, a disease that scars the bile ducts and gradually causes serious liver damage, had worsened. He needed a transplant. He's been waiting listed for a donor liver for 6 months. If I don't have the transplant, he says, my liver could pack in. There'd be nothing they could do for me. And also in the article, which is absolutely essential read, he's facing his biggest battle now. I was really scared when I got told I needed a liver transplant, he says. I thought that was it. But then when the surgeon and the transplant team came around, they got so many people in the team, coordinators, the anaesthetists, physios, psychiatrists. You see people who've overcome the operation. It's kind of routine for the hospital now. They do so many of them. When I was first diagnosed, my eyes were yellow, my skin was jaundiced. The PSC is the scarring of the tubes in your liver, the tubes that produce bile. If the scarring gets so thick, the bile can't go through the tubes into your liver and goes into your bloodstream. That's why I was going yellow, where the bile was going into my bloodstream. And to finish, this is part 2 of my life. I want to see what I can achieve. The hard thing is I'm dependent on someone else's misfortune to get it, but if I'm given another opportunity at life, I'm going to embrace it. We wish the best for Kieran Dyer of Ipswich, Newcastle, West Ham, QPR, Middlesbrough and England. He was a huge talent, 33 England caps, dogged by injuries throughout his career, Kieran Dyer, but just shows, I suppose, Arthur, the fragility of life, and you wish him well.
Yeah, that's devastating. That's extremely sad. Yeah, he's someone I've not really thought about in a while, I suppose, just when he kind of ventured off. But when I was properly coming into football first, maybe 10, I suppose, it's 20, sorry, not 20, obviously, about early 2000s. And he was just we part of that Newcastle team, like with Shearer and Bellamy and all these guys, Shea Given obviously coming through. It was just such an exciting under Bobby Robson.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, God, I hope that works out all right for him, to be honest.
It reminds me of Jonah Lomu, actually. And I was lucky enough to meet him and chat to him before he unfortunately passed away. He had real bad kind of struggles with his liver as well, and like you said, John, it just shows the fragility of life, but also, you have a tendency to hold these guys up, and no one more than Jonah Lomu, like this indestructible force, like on a rugby pitch, an absolute true trailblazer. And you don't kind of get, I suppose, starstruck or whatever much I certainly don't nowadays in terms of people who you're chatting to and meeting in the game, but I have to say, meeting Jonah Lomu that time a good few years ago was a real cherished memory I have.
Yeah, well said. And other soccer riding, Arthur, we have obviously the kind of, you're always going to get the post-mortems on the Nations League and the Republic of Ireland and the constant
Yeah, well, there's an interesting piece. You pointed it out to me first in the Sunday Times, Paul Rowan, talking about Troy Parrott. And it's kind of, I suppose, it's not saying, I suppose, what is going to happen one way or another. There is a degree of uncertainty about, I suppose, what happens for him next. And it's you kind of also at the same time, there's that fear that despite being so, at one point, and again, we got to be realistic, he's extremely young, but it's funny, like when you see the likes now of Obafemi, kind of, it really clicked for him at Swansea towards the end of last season, and he'll kick on, you presume, again. And you're just kind of, the next decision almost kind of feels for Parrott, who kind of had a bit of a mixed bag over the last 4 Nations League games, it kind of feels like it's going to be essential for him, and you really want him to land. Kind of the loan moves have been okay for him. He's probably not going to make the breakthrough at Spurs.
No, he's not.
You know, and it's just that's the reality of it. He probably won't get he obviously will not get into another Premier League thing. No, not yet. That's what I mean. So that kind of next move, but like, I suppose people always kind of laud the competitiveness of the Championship, but it's like there's also that unpredictability. Like, you could latch yourself onto a thing that's going brilliantly and it completely fires you up again the line, or you go somewhere that for all intents and purposes seems sound, well run.
Derby County.
Exactly, and all of a sudden, God almighty, you could be getting relegated. Like, so it's extremely important for him. But it's interesting. I'm fascinated by those kind of, there's for college, I don't know the quote, I think that he who matures early lives in anticipation. And I think for someone like Parrott, who was so bright, like everybody talked about him and the way they talked about him. I remember Stephen Elliott, on one Saturday with you, talking about seeing him play in Clontarf somewhere, even that far back. And just this guy who is just supremely talented. We've seen glimpses of that talent, but you are kind of now, it's like, right, well, MK Dons, Millwall kind of didn't, it was okay. MK Dons was kind of okay when you went there. And it's that next kind of decision that you want to see him kind of fulfill his potential. Even some degree of it, like, because it is there. Like, he's obviously got the way people talk about him. Like, you just kind of want to see it happen, though. But it's so fragile.
Well, the one line out of it I took out of the article: going on loan is playing men's football.
Yeah.
And realising what you have to do throughout a game. I think I've matured a lot over the 3 loans I've had. I'm just happy it's starting to click. But as you're right, it's the cusp now. It's make or break to a degree.
It is.
With Troy Parrott. We had this at Robbie Brady. Robbie Brady was the man at Man United. He was going to be the star at Man United. And he's had a very successful career. We all remember Lille. But, he had a very successful career, Burnley and holding all these teams. But we're talking about a global league that is now much more competitive than it was 30 years ago in terms of Irish players and other players like from Wales and Scotland breaking into this league. And that's what we're seeing with Nathan Collins now, that people are going, wow, well, Nathan Collins could be working at Vincent Kompany, Josh Cullen could end up at Burnley, all these things could happen. But then Burnley could have ownership issues. It might be right for Nathan Collins to get out of Burnley, and that's where agents, that's where family comes in, that's where living your life the right way comes in, that's where advice comes in, that's where dedication comes in. And these are the things that are really important now for Troy Parrott, because we're seeing, I think, with his game, a bit more, as you say, maturity, a bit more aggression at times, a bit more intelligence. Because Troy Parrott, for me, for anything I know about him, he's always been a player that has instinct to be in the right place at the right time and score.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.